Chapter 507. In this broken world, Ning Chen carried his sword and saber as he moved forward alone. Space would occasionally collapse around him, so he had to be extra careful. After arriving here, he had inexplicably fought 2 battles. Although he didn't obtain much information, he at least understood 3 things. The most obvious thing was that the people of Sky Beyond Heaven were very hostile to the people of the Inner Realm. In addition, coming here from Sky Beyond Heaven should be much easier than coming from the 5 regions. Finally, and the most important thing, since the people of Sky Beyond Heaven had appeared here, it meant that there was something here that everyone wanted. Perhaps the legend of the Immortal Palace wasn't just baseless rumors. The long search took another half a month. The unfamiliar world became more and more unstable. More and more space collapsed. It seemed like it would completely collapse at any moment. Suddenly, the fluctuations of a great battle came from far away. As far as his eyes could see, pieces of the world collapsed and spread out. Ning Chen focused his attention. His figure flashed out and rushed towards the battlefield. 10 miles away, Ning Chen stopped. He hid his aura and quietly watched the battle in the distance. In the battle, 2 men wielding long swords were besieging a white-clothed woman. The woman's body movements were peculiar, and the tip of her fingers was strange and awe-inspiring. Although she was at a disadvantage, she was always able to resolve the crisis at the crucial moment. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. When Ning Chen saw the woman's martial arts, he sneered. It was clear that this woman was from the same sect as the crazy woman who had ambushed him before. The 2 young men took turns to attack and defend. Their movements were very similar. They were both at the peak of the 3 disasters. When they worked together, even the woman in white found it difficult to deal with them. As Ning Chen watched the battle and saw the cooperation between the 2, he couldn't help but praise them. The difficulty of going against the flow was extraordinary. The difference in realms wasn't something that could be made up for by numbers. The sword techniques and cooperation of these 2 young men were truly rare. Talent was indeed something that made people gasp in amazement at times. However, the influence of one's cultivation base on one's strength was much greater than expected. These 2 young men would soon experience it. Great Void Battle Technique. As she spoke, the woman in white forcefully pushed away the sword in front of her. Her slender hand circulated a vast amount of true essence. Waves of black energy gathered on her fingertips. A terrifying pressure caused the ground within 10 miles to shake violently. Finger of Extinction. With a point of his finger, the void was annihilated. Black streams of light howled and surged, and the heavens and the earth instantly lost their color. The 2 of them brandished their swords to block. Their swords flowed from the same source, and their ultimate moves complemented each other. They transformed into a ray of purifying sword light and broke through the air. With a loud bang, the 2 extremes collided. A fountain of blood gushed out. The woman's chest was pierced by a sword, and her blood dyed the sand red. However, on the other side, the black flowing light entered their bodies. The 2 figures groaned at the same time. A moment later, they staggered a few steps, vomited blood, and fell straight down. In the desolate battlefield, dust and sand flew everywhere. The unwilling war spirits disappeared, unable to rise again. What a pity, they could have been stronger. In the distance, Ning Chen shook his head and sighed. The greatest barrier to going against the flow of the Celestial Slayer was to break the opponent's moves but not their strength. In the end, these 2 youngsters were still inferior. Pooh! On the battlefield, the victor stood upright. Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of blood, dyeing the yellow sand red. At this moment, a red light flashed. It was so fast that no one could react. The white-clothed woman's pupils fiercely shrank. Just as she was about to attack, she saw blood spurt out. Her sword finger was like a god, and a sword broke through her chi-si. After 3 successful attacks, her body was destroyed. The woman staggered, but the sword did not stop. It turned into a claw and grabbed the woman's neck. Someone from the inner realm. The white-clothed woman's expression changed. Miss, you have good eyes. Please cooperate with me so that you don't make things difficult for me. Ning Chen's right hand tightened even more as he smiled. Despicable. The white-clothed woman was unwilling to give up. Her true essence flowed backwards, and she was about to self-destruct like the previous person. However, the true essence that had been destroyed scattered everywhere. Blood and chi clashed, and with a groan, blood dripped down. You want to self-destruct? Too late. Ning Chen sneered. His left hand quickly flipped over, and imprints entered the woman's body. The yellow springs opened, and the woman's remaining cultivation was forcefully sealed. I'll give you 2 choices. 1. Answer whatever I ask you. 2. I'll forcefully search your soul. As for whether or not you'll become an idiot, I can't guarantee that, said Ning Chen calmly. The woman's expression changed. She wasn't afraid of death, but she was afraid of living a life worse than death. What do you want to know? She forcefully suppressed the hatred in her heart. First question. What is your name and where did you come from? Ning Chen put down the woman and smiled once more. Spirit Void, Jiangli, she coldly replied. Oh. Spirit Void. So Miss also came from that place. Ning Chen's eyes flashed. It seemed this Spirit Void wasn't the name of a sect. Have you met other people from Spirit Void? Jiang Li's expression sunk. Ha! Ning Chen faintly smiled. A person called Ji Ruxue. Does Miss Jiang know him? Hearing this name, Jiang Li's hands clenched, and her hatred grew. Even if he turned to ashes, I would still know him. Hearing this, Ning Chen's interest was piqued. It was good that they knew each other, and it was even better if they had enmity. Under the moonlight, the 2 of them walked side by side. If it wasn't for the bloodstains on the woman's clothes, perhaps no one would be able to tell that the 2 of them had fought to the death. Jiang Li revealed some information about Spirit Void. Only then did Ning Chen understand that Spirit Void was the name of a cultivation planet, which was the place where Jiang Li and Ji Ruxue came from. In the outer heavens, cultivation planets were widely distributed. Spirit Void was undoubtedly one of the best and was famous throughout the outer heavens. As for the inner world, it was a name the outer heavens gave to the 5 regions. Because the heavens and earth were boundless, there was no distinction between the inner and outer worlds. However, a supreme existence changed everything. Countless years ago, the Nether King appeared in the outer heavens and suppressed all those who resisted. Then he refined countless large planets and created the 5 regions. He used a formation to separate the 5 regions from the outer heavens, forming the world of today. Hearing this, Ning Chen fell silent. Perhaps he had guessed why the Nether King would do such a thing. The Netherworld King's nature was noble and pure, and he could not tolerate the existence of any filthy things. It was very likely that he created the 5 regions because he was disgusted with the conflicts between humans in the realm beyond heaven. Thus, he wanted to personally create a pure land to isolate the filth of the world. He didn't expect that the development of the 5 regions would ultimately disappoint the gods. The greed of human nature grew over time and continued to spread. In the end, it provoked the wrath of the gods. They descended twice and used blood to cleanse the filth of the mortal world. One more thing. How did Miss Jiang recognize that I'm from the inner world? Ning Chen asked, puzzled. The 3 people he met all recognized his origin at a glance. It was really unusual. Jiang Li didn't hide anything and calmly said, everyone who comes to the celestial realm from the outer heavens has been baptized by the celestial transformation pool. You don't have the aura of the celestial transformation pool, so you're naturally not from the outer heavens. Is this really the celestial realm? Where is the immortal palace, and why did you come here? Ning Chen's eyes narrowed as he asked. This is indeed the celestial realm, but it was destroyed countless years ago. As for the whereabouts of the immortal palace, no one knows. We came here mainly to find a unique source jade in the celestial realm. We call it the immortal origin, answered Jiangli. What use does it have? Asked Ning Chen with a frown. It's useless right now. However, the density of spiritual energy above the great circle of the celestial realm is no longer enough to satisfy the requirements for cultivation. You must have this immortal origin to continue cultivating, said Jiangli. Is it this? Ning Chen frowned and flipped his right hand. An origin jade appeared. Its enormous spiritual energy was faintly discernible. It was extremely shocking. Jiangli was shocked. The immortal origin. Where did you find it? How many do you have? Asked Jiangli. I picked it up on the road. This is the only one. Ning Chen casually replied, but he was inwardly shocked. So this thing was the immortal origin. Back in the competition tower, he had snatched quite a few. If he had known this thing was so precious, he would have snatched all of it. What a pity. Disappointment flashed across Jiang Li's face. There were extremely few places in the celestial realm that could condense immortal origins. Moreover, one needed luck to find one. Picking one up on the road wasn't strange, but it was just too few. Do you know where I can find this thing? Let's snatch it together. We'll split it 30-70, suggested Ning Chen. Right now, no one knew where the immortal palace was. Searching aimlessly was useless. Rather than that, it was better to snatch some useful things first. 50-50. Jiang Li narrowed her eyes. 50-60. I can't give you any more. 50-50. Jiang Li wasn't willing to relent. 50-60, if you don't agree, I'll search your soul. At that time, you won't be able to get a single piece, threatened Ning Chen. Stop acting. You don't know the soul-searching technique at all. Jiang Li sneered. At first, she had been careless and believed his words. Now that she had calmed down, she felt that something wasn't right. If he really knew the soul-searching technique, why did he have to go through so much trouble? Leniency. Pity for the fairer sex. The youngster in front of her clearly didn't possess any of those. Lady Jiang truly is exceptionally intelligent. 50-50 then. 50-50 is a small matter. Ning Chen revealed a warm smile. He really didn't expect this woman to react so quickly. Back then, he hadn't learned the soul-searching technique from Nu Chang. It really was a mistake. About 7 days of travel from here, there is an abyss. Every once in a while, an immortal source will be produced. However, there are quite a few experts among the people who came to the immortal domain this time. They should all be rushing over. It won't be easy to get a share of the profits, said Jiang Li. Will there be a great perfection expert? Asked Ning Chen. No. The immortal domain is already on the verge of collapse. There is a limit to what it can take. Great perfection experts cannot enter, replied Jiang Li. Ning Chen nodded and stopped. With a flip of his right hand, a green medicinal pill appeared. He handed it over to the former. What is it? A trace of coldness flashed through Jiang Li's eyes. 100-flower pill, poison. Ning Chen indifferently said. Take this medicine, and I'll undo the restrictions on your body. As for the antidote, I'll give it to you when we leave. Chapter 508. In this world, there were very few people that Ning Chen trusted, and Butterfly in the Flower was definitely one of them. At the same time, Butterfly in the Flower treasured this junior apprentice brother of hers very much. The 100-flower Dan was indeed a poison. It was an extremely terrifying poison. Within a month, if one didn't take the antidote, he or she would die a miserable death. Butterfly in the Flower was good at using poison. Back then, the King of Shadows suffered because of this poison. The 100-flower Dan on Ning Chen was given to him by Butterfly in case he needed it. Jiang Li looked at the Dan in Ning Chen's hand and hesitated for a while. In the end, she took it and swallowed it. She had no choice but to lower her head when she was under someone else's roof. She would definitely return this favor tenfold in the future. Seeing this, Ning Chen's eyes flashed with admiration. Only by knowing when to submit and when to stand tall can one have a chance to turn the tables. This woman's mentality really impressed him. As for revenge, he didn't know if he would have a chance in the future. However, in the immortal region, he would not give her any chances. As soon as the poison entered her mouth, it quickly spread through her meridians and disappeared. Jiang Li's heart sank. It seemed like it would be impossible to force the poison out. Seeing that Jiang Li had swallowed the 100-flower Dan, Ning Chen kept his promise. He concentrated his energy into her body and unlocked the underworld seal. After recovering, Jiang Li shouted. Qi swirled around her and her finger pierced through the air towards Ning Chen. The two attacks collided. Boundless qi surged. Inside the shockwave, Ning Chen's smile remained. He said calmly, Miss Jiang, you cannot win against me right now. Please lead the way. Jiang Li snorted coldly and turned around to walk away. Ning Chen smiled faintly. He retracted his qi and followed her. For 7 whole days, the two of them traveled day and night without stopping for a moment. Jiang Li temporarily suppressed her injuries with Dan. However, her broken body couldn't recover in a short period of time. Every time she thought about this, Jiang Li's hatred towards the young man beside her increased. However, she suppressed it and didn't explode. Ning Chen knew exactly what Jiang Li was thinking. However, there were too many people in the world who wanted to kill him. One more wouldn't make a difference. When you have too many lice, you don't itch. When you have too many debts, you don't have to worry about it. It's just that he didn't need to care about people's feelings. If he could disgust those who wanted to kill him, he would have done so. 7 days later, 10 li away from the immortal extermination ravine, 2 people appeared and stopped in their tracks. Miss Jiang, you can go in first, Ning Chen said. You're not going in with us. Jiang Li frowned and asked. One in the light and one in the dark. Only then can we have unexpected results. Since you can recognize me as someone from the inner realm, that means others can as well. If we appear together, it won't be good for either of us, said Ning Chen calmly. How do I know if you will keep your promise? Jiang Li asked in a low voice. Do you have any other choice? Ning Chen asked indifferently. Jiang Li snorted coldly again. He didn't say anything else. His figure flashed as he flew toward the mountain stream ahead. Behind her, Ning Chen looked at the back of the woman as she left. Her red robes gradually faded and disappeared. The immortal execution stream was a deep and gloomy ancient stream. It was rumored that before the desolate era, a true immortal was buried here, hence the name Immortal Execution. In a few days, ancient chariots, golden palanquins, dragon palanquins, and even half-step supreme-level existences arrived at the immortal extermination valley. Experts gathered and waited for the immortal origin to appear. The immortal origin was condensed from heaven and earth's essence. It contained an enormous amount of spiritual qi, and a small amount of it even contained fragments of laws. It was extremely precious. Among the experts with terrifying auras, 4 people were the most eye-catching. One of them was Ji Ruxue, who Ning Chen had encountered that day. Of the other 3, one was standing on top of a dragon palanquin. He was covered in golden armor and was tall and slender. He held a golden spear in his hand. His starry eyes were like swords, making him look like a god of war. Another person wasn't riding a mount. He was tall and sturdy with a battle axe on his back. He was domineering and his aura didn't lose out to anyone. The final person was a woman with delicate features. She wasn't particularly beautiful, but she gave off an unforgettable feeling. She stood there, and even the world around her seemed to lose its color. The four of them all had different auras. Only their dreadful pressure showed how extraordinary they were. The increasingly solemn atmosphere in the immortal extermination valley indicated that the immortal origin was about to appear. In front of everyone, a slender youth was holding a compass. He was constantly divining the location of the immortal origin. The youth's cultivation base wasn't outstanding. He was only around the first calamity. Among the experts of sky beyond heaven, he could only be ranked at the bottom. However, even so, everyone was very polite to the youth. They were even somewhat respectful. The immortal origin has already appeared. It's 33 miles north of here. However, the divination shows that this trip is extremely dangerous. I advise everyone not to take this risk, said the youth gravely. Many thanks for Tian Hengzi's reminder. However, if we give up this time, we'll have to wait at least 60 years. The immortal realm is already on the verge of collapse, and no one knows how long it can last. Thus, even if it's a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, I still have to give it a try. Ji Ruxue stood on top of a black chariot and drove it north. Brother Ji is correct. Time waits for no one. If everyone isn't leaving, then I'll be leaving first. On top of the dragon chariot, the young man in golden armor no longer hesitated and rushed towards the direction Tian Hengzi had mentioned. The two of them left. Of the remaining two peak half-exalts, the woman who had been silent the entire time still didn't say a word. She lightly walked towards the north alone. They've all gone. If I still don't go, then it'll seem like I am a coward. Seeing the three of them leave, the brawny man with the battle axe on his back smiled freely and walked towards the north with large strides. The four peak experts had already left. The remaining people hesitated again and again. Apart from the youth, everyone else also followed. In the depths of immortal execution stream, spring water gurgled. In this ancient land that had existed since time immemorial, figures entered one after another. War chariots filled the air and dragon chariots floated up and down, breaking the silence of time. Oh! It's here, said the man in golden armor calmly as he looked ahead. In the broken world before him, a huge cauldron that was extremely damaged stood in the spring water. After the baptism of countless years, many mottled green rust had appeared on the cauldron, covering its original appearance. However, what was even more eye-catching was that above the green cauldron, pieces of shattered space fell down and coincidentally fell into the cauldron. Law fragments. On the black war chariot, Ji Ruxue's expression became serious. An immortal origin that contained law fragments was extremely rare. It seemed their luck wasn't bad. The immortal origin is in the cauldron. However, we can't doubt Tian Hengzi's words. How about the four of us join hands and take out the immortal origin first? Then we'll fight for it with our own abilities, said the man in golden armor. Sure. Ji Ruxue nodded. That's good. The brawny man with the battle axe also nodded in agreement. The woman who hadn't spoken this entire time nodded slightly. Although she still didn't say anything, she had also expressed her attitude. The four strongest people present had reached an agreement, and an alliance was formed for a short time. On the war chariot, Ji Ruxue was the first to attack. Azure lightning crackled as a divine sword appeared and slashed toward the green cauldron. The green cauldron violently trembled, and the surrounding world collapsed even faster. However, a moment later, a green light soared and devoured the sword light. When the other three saw this, their eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. They were extremely clear on Ji Ruxue's strength. It was impossible for him to be unable to break a broken cauldron. Let's join hands and try, said the man in the dragon chariot. With that, the four of them circulated their true essence. Their moves converged and collided with the green cauldron in front of them. With a world-shaking rumble, the space 300 meters around them collapsed. The green cauldron shone brightly and devoured their power. In the next moment, the immortal execution sword was activated, and the entire immortal execution stream instantly turned into hell on earth. Dense swordlight rose and fell between heaven and earth. Four destructive swords appeared in the air, suppressing everything and destroying the Grand Tao. Immortal execution, 4 swords. Their expressions changed at the same time. How was this possible? When the immortal execution swords appeared, a monstrous killing aura erupted. Space instantly collapsed and devoured all the light. In the endless void, thousands of sword light fell from the sky. They were as heavy as mountains and as fast as lightning. Those who touched them would die, and those who grazed them would be injured. Save me! Hell appeared in the immortal execution stream. One figure after another couldn't withstand the killing swordlight and exploded. Miserable cries shook the sky. The resentment of death rose and turned into the 4 swords again, increasing the killing swordlight's power. In the blink of an eye, the shattered flesh and blood dyed the immortal execution stream red. Broken limbs were everywhere. Less than 30% of the original people could stand. At the place closest to the green cauldron, the 4 peak half-venerables were surrounded by divine light. Their figures were constantly moving, dodging the chilling sword light. On the black chariot, a sword hung upside down in the sky. Countless sword light fell. Wuxia waved his sword against the immortal execution stream. With a world-shaking rumble, blood splattered on the chariot. The peak half-venerables were injured by the sword. The most terrifying immortal execution prohibition had revealed its fangs. The geniuses of the outer heavens were in imminent danger. Outside the immortal execution stream, red light gathered and knowing destiny appeared. Looking at the stream that had turned into hell on earth, he narrowed his eyes. It seemed that he had made the right choice not to rush in. Today, he had seen the immortal execution prohibition. This trip had not been in vain. Outside the stream, the youth holding the compass sighed softly. He looked at the red-clothed youth and said, "Sir, please save them once." "Oh." Ning Chen looked at the youth not far away and calmly asked, "Why?" "As long as you are willing to help, Tian Hengzi will help you once." "As long as it is within my ability, anything is possible," the youth promised. "How do you know I can save them?" Ning Chen asked. "The heavenly compass can calculate everything in the world," the youth replied. "Then you should be able to see that I am from the inner realm. Do you think I will save some people who are hostile to the inner realm?" Ning Chen coldly asked. The youth was silent. After a long time, he softly said, "What if I can help you deduce the location of the immortal palace?" Hearing this, Ning Chen's eyes lit up. He looked at the youth and slowly said, "That is true. They will live together. Otherwise, everyone from the outer heavens, including you, will be buried here." Chapter 509. Outside Zhuxian Valley, Ming and Tian Hengzi looked at each other. Inside the valley, geniuses from the outer sky were dying every second. Time was so precious at this moment. Ning Chen was not in a hurry. Even if everyone inside died, he would not be soft-hearted, including Jiangli. "I will try my best to figure out the location of Immortal Palace. During this time, I hope you can break the restriction first." The young man looked at the Zhuxian Valley that was getting heavier and heavier. He turned around and said seriously, "Okay." Ning Chen nodded and said, "The day you figure out the location of Immortal Palace is the day the restriction is broken. Their lives are in your hands. Don't make me wait for too long." Then, Ning Chen walked in front of the restriction. Phoenix Chi rose around him and he slapped on it. Inside the immortal execution restriction, the 4 slaughter swords seemed to have sensed something. One of the swords flashed and a terrifying sword chi shot out. It passed through the restriction and headed straight for the formation breaker outside the stream. Seeing this, Ning Chen quickly turned his left hand. Behind him, a huge phoenix shadow appeared. With a shocking phoenix cry, the phoenix fire burned brightly and drowned the sword light. In the next moment, many seals were shot out from Ning Chen's hand. The yellow spring opened and sealed the slaughter celestial swords. Through the yellow spring, Ning Chen quietly observed the immortal slaying transformations. After a few breaths, the Zhu Xian sword dissipated. The yellow spring restriction also disappeared. Ning Chen memorized some of the changes and used the same trick again. He used the yellow spring to seal the slaughter celestial swords. At the same time, outside the Zhu Xian Valley, Tian Hengzi's hands moved. He used his life to activate the compass in his hand. He opened his heavenly eye and looked into the mortal world. The spirit void, or even the entire outer sky, the most talented heaven teller, opened his heavenly eye. 2 drops of blood tears flowed down silently. The immortal domain was vast and time had left its mark. The heaven teller burned his life to find immortality. The Zhu Xian Valley changed. Tian Hengzi who peeped into heaven's secrets caused the world to settle. Above the 9 heavens, thunder rumbled and covered the sky. At this moment, the heavenly compass emitted a dark light and covered the young man's breath. It temporarily blocked the heavenly path's senses. Droplets of blood dripped down her white clothes, dyeing them into bright flowers. It was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. Heavenly calculators were originally practitioners who went against the heavens. They had seen too many things that they shouldn't have seen, so they had to suffer the consequences. In front of the mountain stream, Ning Chen saw this scene. His calm expression did not change in the slightest. In this world, if there was a reward for putting in effort, that would be the most fortunate thing in the world. At the same time, the smell of blood in the immortal execution forbidden ground became thicker. The 4 immortal slaughter swords absorbed the resentment of the people before they died and became even more powerful. The might of the divine restriction was unstoppable. More and more experts died, and even the 4 most powerful heavenly talents were dyed red. The situation was extremely dangerous. Yellow springs, passage of time, and immortal slaying. Among the 3 types of heaven and earth divine seals, the yellow springs divine seal was the most complicated, the passage of time divine seal was the most mysterious, and the immortal slaying divine seal was the most dangerous. It was rumored that this divine seal had once slain immortals. Once one entered the divine seal, they would never be able to leave again. The yellow spring could be broken because although there were many changes, it was not aggressive. As long as it was not a complete yellow spring forbidden ground, there would be traces to be found. In comparison, the immortal execution forbidden ground was much more terrifying. The name immortal execution revealed its essence. It was a killing formation with extremely strong offensive power. Moreover, the 4 immortal swords in the forbidden ground would continuously absorb the resentment of the people before they died. They would become stronger and stronger until all the living beings in the forbidden ground were killed. In front of the forbidden ground, Ning Chen used the yellow spring to seal the immortal execution sword Qi. He kept observing the changes in the forbidden ground. The more he understood, the more confident he would be in breaking the forbidden ground. 1 day, 2 days. Time passed day by day. There were fewer and fewer people alive in the immortal execution forbidden ground. The ground was filled with corpses and bones. It was hell on earth. It was extremely cruel. For the experts in the outer sky, it was fortunate that the immortal execution forbidden ground was already broken. Its power was not even 10% of its full power. Otherwise, even if a true immortal came, he would die. 13 days later, Ning Chen waved his hand to disperse the immortal execution sword Qi in the yellow spring forbidden ground. He turned around and looked at the young man not far away. He said calmly, "How is it? Did you find it?" Tian Hengzi nodded. He slowly closed his eyes. 2 streams of blood tears fell silently. He said tiredly, the Immortal Palace is northwest of the Immortal Execution Stream. I can't confirm the exact distance. However, if we follow this direction, we will eventually see it. Ning Chen frowned slightly. He didn't say anything. He raised his hand and pressed it in front of the Immortal Execution Forbidden Ground. Phoenix fire spread and covered the entire stream. With rumbling sounds, the Immortal Execution Forbidden Ground slowly collapsed. Inside the Forbidden Ground, the experts in the outer sky looked at the changes in the surroundings. They were shocked at first. Then, they became excited. Someone broke the Immortal Execution Forbidden Ground. Wuxia narrowed his eyes when he saw the 4 immortal swords disappearing into thin air. As soon as he said that, the man in golden armor on the dragon carriage looked around. His eyes darkened. Something's not right. In the Immortal Execution Stream, the moment the 4 immortal execution swords disappeared, the space shook. The gate of hell appeared and the Yellow Spring Forbidden Ground opened. The group of people who were about to escape was trapped again. It's him. Feeling this familiar aura, Jiang Li's expression darkened. In the Yellow Spring, Red Robe appeared. He walked step by step to the green cauldron. With a slap of his right hand, he pulled the green cauldron out. Miss Jiang, let's go. Ning Chen waved his hand and took the green cauldron. He walked in front of Jiang Li and said. The illusory red robe in the Forbidden Ground attracted everyone's attention. The man in golden armor waved the golden spear in his hand, wanting to stop him. However, before the golden light arrived, the void rolled violently. Many Forbidden Ground appeared and blocked the spear light. The next moment, Red Robe grabbed Jiang Li's arm and brought him out of the Yellow Spring Forbidden Ground. Your Excellency. Outside the Immortal Execution Stream, Tian Hengzi moved and blocked the path of the two. He looked troubled. Ning Chen stopped and looked at the young man with bloodstains under his eyes. He said lightly, the Immortal Execution Forbidden Ground has been broken. You and I don't owe each other anything. If you don't get out of the way, you can die with no regrets. Tian Hengzi sighed and stepped aside helplessly. Ning Chen took Jiang Li and walked away. He didn't look back. Heaven's will. Tian Hengzi looked at the Forbidden Ground and sighed again. He had no choice but to open his bloodshot eyes again. The path to the Yellow Spring was difficult. He couldn't just sit by and watch. The two of them walked in the northwest direction of the Immortal Execution Stream. Ning Chen didn't say a word and quietly thought about something. The Yellow Spring Forbidden Ground wasn't that easy to break. Even with the help of a heaven diviner, it would be difficult for those outer heaven cultivators to come out in a short period of time. In addition, from the backlash Tian Hengzi received when divining the location of the Immortal Palace, he must have used up a lot of his vitality. If he forcefully broke the Forbidden Ground again, the fate of this heaven diviner was self-evident. In this world, there were 2 kinds of people that were the hardest to kill. One was those with great fortune or great merit, such as the emperors of the mortal world. The other was the heaven diviner. These 2 kinds of people had always been people that cultivators didn't want to provoke easily. The misfortune of karma was not a joke. Ning Chen was very clear about the threat a heaven diviner posed to him, especially when this heaven diviner came from the outer heaven that was very hostile to the inner realm. Thus, he set down the Yellow Spring Forbidden Ground to delay Wuxia and the others and to deal with Tian Hengzi. Where are you taking me? After walking for a long time and seeing that the former didn't say a word, Jiang Li finally couldn't help but ask. Immortal Palace. Ning Chen came back to his senses and calmly said. Hearing this, Jiang Li was stunned. She asked in disbelief, you know where Immortal Palace is? I didn't know before, but I know now. Ning Chen replied. Jiang Li wasn't an idiot. She quickly thought of the crux of the matter and said with a serious expression, did Tian Hengzi tell you? Although they hadn't known each other for long, she understood the young man beside her very well. Unless there were benefits to be gained, he definitely wouldn't save them. Ning Chen nodded. He had to admit that this heaven diviner from the outer heaven was truly an incredible genius. Looking at his face, this person's true age shouldn't be more than 60 years. He wasn't an old monster that had a technique to keep his appearance. He didn't know how many people in the world could calculate the location of Immortal Palace, but it definitely wouldn't exceed the number of people on one hand. Jiang Li hesitated for a moment and asked, "When will you give me my half of the immortal origin?" Ning Chen stopped and waved his right hand. Red light surged and a broken green cauldron appeared in front of him. "Take it yourself," Ning Chen said casually. Jiang Li's eyes narrowed. She didn't think the former would give her the immortal origin so straightforwardly. It seemed that although this person's character wasn't very good, he kept his promise. Inside the broken green cauldron, pieces of immortal origin were quietly piled up. Spiritual energy curled around them, and it looked like there were several hundred pieces. However, no one knew which immortal origin contained law fragments. Jiang Li quietly looked at it for a moment. When she discovered that she really couldn't identify the law fragments, she didn't look anymore and waved her hand to collect her half. "How are we going to split this cauldron?" asked Jiang Li calmly. "If you can break it open, I'll give you half. If you can't, then just treat it as you thanking me for saving your life. I don't like owing others favors, and I hate it even more when others owe me favors," said Ning Chen righteously. Jiang Li sneered and didn't say anything else. A person's skin could actually be so thick. Previously, Ji Ruxue, Pound, and the others were unable to damage the cauldron at all. It could be seen that this broken green cauldron was definitely not as simple as it seemed. If she could see that the green cauldron was extraordinary, then the person beside her would definitely be able to as well. Unfortunately, their promise didn't include anything other than the immortal origin. Ning Chen didn't care what Jiang Li thought. He waved his hand and put away the green cauldron. This thing hadn't been damaged even in the immortal execution Forbidden Land, so it could be seen just how shockingly tough it was. Even if it didn't have any other uses, it could still be used as a shield. "Why are you bringing me to the Immortal Palace?" Jiang Li turned around and asked. Everyone wanted to know where the Immortal Palace was, and she was no exception. Just now, he clearly could have left on his own, but he still brought her along. That made her a bit confused. Don't tell her that he was protective of the fairer sex or that he had taken a liking to her. That was just an excuse. "One more person means one more person to take care of," said Ning Chen casually. "I want to hear the truth," said Jiang Li coldly. "Heh." Ning Chen laughed and said, "Because your life is in my hands. If I die, you won't be able to live either. So if I really do encounter any danger in the Immortal Palace, the only person who can save me is you." Chapter 5:10. In the broken and silent immortal domain, a cold moon shone high in the sky. Two people walked side by side under the moon. 10 days had passed since they left immortal execution stream. The immortal domain was vast with no end in sight. The shattered sky and collapsed nothingness could be seen everywhere. It was dark and gloomy, making one's heart shiver. The two of them did their best to avoid these dangerous places, quickly advancing in the direction Tian Hengzi pointed out. Ning Chen never doubted Tian Hengzi's words, because the heavens calculator could choose not to speak, but he definitely wouldn't lie. After searching for another 3 days, Immortal Palace's traces still hadn't appeared. The damage of heaven and earth became more and more obvious. It was to the extent where even the path forward was obstructed. The two of them had no choice but to take detours again and again to avoid places where space had collapsed. Along the way, Jiang Li's expression became more and more serious. The damage of heaven and earth here was so severe. Would Immortal Palace still exist? Finally, on the 15th day, there was no more path in front of the two of them. When they looked up, the entire world had collapsed. It was a boundless nothingness with no end in sight. Ning Chen stopped. Looking at the darkness ahead, he didn't hesitate too much, directly walking in. "Wait," Jiangli said. Ning Chen turned around and looked at the woman, not saying anything. "Antidote," Jiangli said with a heavy voice. She could feel that the poison in her body was already on the verge of erupting. It should erupt within these 2 days. Ning Chen flipped his palm, and a medicinal pill appeared in his hand. He immediately handed it over. Jiangli took the medicine and swallowed it. She circulated her true essence to dissolve the medicinal properties. A moment later, her brows furrowed, and her expression became cold. "This isn't the antidote." Ning Chen casually replied, and said, "It really isn't the antidote. This medicine can only help you temporarily suppress the 100-flower pill's poison. It can't cure the poison. The antidote will be given to you, but not now." After saying this, Ning Chen didn't say anything else, continuing forward. Jiangli clenched her fists, and the hatred in her eyes became more and more difficult to conceal. In the end, her rationality suppressed her impulse, and she followed. Right now, she couldn't win against this person. Only by enduring for a while would she have a chance to get revenge. The two of them advanced in the endless nothingness. There was no path, no direction, and they couldn't even sense of time. The only thing that existed was the eternal silence and darkness. Ning Chen waved his right hand. The phoenix fire rose and a divine sun gathered in the sky. Its divine light pierced through the void and illuminated the endless darkness. Feeling the terrifying pressure coming from the divine sun, Jiang Li's body tensed up subconsciously. Her expression became serious. This was not a human flame, but she could not tell what it was. How many secrets was this person hiding? Outside the void, time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 days and nights had passed. In the void, the two figures walked further and further away. A divine sun rose up and down, illuminating an area of darkness. The nothingness that swallowed everything and the phoenix flames that were not the flames of the mortal world collided with each other and consumed each other. The 30-foot square became the only pure land within the darkness. At the same time, in front of the immortal extermination stream, Tian Hengzi, who had forcefully opened his heaven's eye once more, had consumed a large amount of his life force. He was already nearing the end of his life. In the Netherworld seal, the 4 top prodigies worked together to break the seal. Their powerful attacks bombarded the flaws that Tian Hengzi had found time and time again. Finally, the Yellow Springs Road was cut off. With an earth-shattering tremor, the divine prohibition was broken, and the powerhouses of the Grandmasters walked out. Pooh! Seeing everyone break out, Tian Hengzi, who had bitterly endured for many days, could no longer hold on. He vomited a mouthful of blood, which dyed his white robes red. Tian Hengzi. On the dragon carriage, Ren Jinghong's figure flashed as he supported the Heaven Teller, who had collapsed powerlessly. He turned over his palm and condensed Yuan Qi into the Heaven Teller's body. Useless. Tian Hengzi said weakly. Then, he glanced at sky beyond heaven in the distance with a hint of regret in his eyes. Immortal. Immortal Palace is to the northwest. Whether it is ominous or auspicious, I cannot divine it. This time, you all can decide for yourselves. His last words disappeared into the night sky along with the cold wind. The heavenly calculator of a generation had disappeared. Tian Hengzi. Ren Jinghong felt a sharp pain in his heart. He clenched his fists so hard that they cracked. Bring Tian Hengzi back to the spirit void and bury him, Ji Ruxue softly sighed on the black war chariot. Ren Jinghong nodded. He picked up Tian Hengzi's corpse and placed it on the dragon carriage. Without saying a word, he drove the carriage towards the northwest. If he didn't get revenge for this, he wasn't human. Northwest of Immortal Punishing Stream, in an extremely distant place, in the endless darkness, the two of them had already traveled for an unknown amount of time. Jiang Li's expression was exceptionally gloomy. She understood clearly that they had very likely already lost themselves in the nothingness. She didn't understand why the man at her side was still so stubborn. If they were forever trapped in the nothingness, even if they found Immortal Palace, what could they do? What Jiang Li didn't know was that ever since they entered Immortal Domain, Ning Chen had already treated this half of his body as an abandoned piece. Even if they were truly trapped here forever, as long as this body didn't die, nothing else mattered. The phoenix body was trapped, but there was still the main body and the demon body. The three bodies were of one mind. Regardless of whether it was 10 years or 100 years, there would always be a day when they could find traces of this body. Of course, if they couldn't find a way to revive the ghost girl, then whether or not the main body and demon body came was no longer important. In the end, Jiang Li still underestimated the ruthlessness of the man at her side. It wasn't only to others, but also to himself. In order to achieve his goal, he could give up anything. Outside the nothingness, figures appeared one after another. When they saw the collapsed world ahead, they stopped their steps. On the dragon carriage, Ren Jinghong's eyes sunk. There was no path ahead. Didn't that mean that Immortal Palace was already buried in the nothingness? On the side, the woman walked into the nothingness. From start to finish, she still hadn't said a single word. On the other side, Ji Ruxue hesitated for a moment before also entering with the war chariot. Two lunatics. The man with the axe on his back cursed in a low voice. He turned around and left. He didn't want to be forever trapped in this collapsed world for the sake of an illusory immortal palace. In the nothingness, another month passed unknowingly. The two had already traveled in the darkness for more than 2 months. Jiang Li's expression became more and more irritated. It was clear that she had already endured to the limit. The most terrifying thing about this family wasn't death, but rather darkness and loneliness. When one's limit was exceeded, even a normal person would be forcefully driven mad. Not everyone could have a heart of stone like Ning Chen's. In the past, even knowing destiny wasn't as calm as it was now. The darkness and loneliness of the underworld were enough to drive one crazy. However, at that time, there would always be a beautiful figure by his side, helping him through the most difficult period of his life. A person's growth wasn't always smooth sailing. Ning Chen had experienced too much and had long learned to be strong. In the 4th month, Jiang Li ignored the poison in her body and erupted with the anger she had been enduring all this time. However, with the 3 successful bodies crippled, how could she be Ning Chen's opponent? Jiang Li was defeated without any surprise. She was defeated miserably. However, Ning Chen didn't kill her because she still had value in living. After going crazy, Jiang Li calmed down quite a bit. Her mental state seemed to have changed a bit. Ning Chen saw this but didn't say anything. Growing up wasn't easy. Learning to accept reality was the most basic step. In the 10th month, the poison in Jiang Li's body erupted for the 4th time. Ning Chen once again used a spiritual aura pill to help her suppress the poison. However, he still didn't give her the antidote. It was clear that Jiang Li had learned to accept reality and no longer struggled pointlessly. She suppressed the hatred in the depths of her heart. After suppressing the poison, she continued to cooperate with Ning Chen to find traces of the Immortal Palace. The divine sun in the darkness became the only light, guiding the two forward. However, the collapsed world was boundless. No one knew where the end was. In fact, they didn't even know if there was an end or not. For tens of thousands of years, no one had ever entered the Immortal Palace. It was the same whether it was the inner world or the outer world. Even if there were amazing diviners who could predict the location of the Immortal Palace, in the end, they were all lost in the void, unable to leave. Just as the two of them gradually lost their way, in an unknown distance, an immortal corpse flew through the darkness, heading towards the depths of the void. Since ancient times, the immortal corpse had never stopped patrolling, carrying out its duties as usual, never changing even after tens of thousands of years. In the central continent, Ji Ming had already been in the Sea of Demonic Wheel for 3 years. The 9 half-step venerables who were in charge of guarding the Sea of Demonic Wheel had also left. Everyone knew that Scarlet Demon would never come out again. During these 3 years, after the Grand White Prefecture, a few more hidden sects appeared. They became the leaders of the central continent along with the Zhao family in the north. Geniuses from all over the place walked out. It was the first golden age of glory. In the eastern border of the central continent, 2 beautiful figures walked over. The woman in front wore a plain dress. She had an extraordinary temperament and gave off an indescribable pressure. Beside her was a beautiful woman in purple. She would intentionally or unintentionally walk half a step behind the woman. Her calm eyes never left the woman in front for even half a second. Zijing, where do you think we should find him? Mingyu looked left and right before asking. This servant doesn't know, Zijing softly said. Do you think he can still recognize me when he sees me? Mingyu seemed to have thought of the situation when they first met and giggled. He can. Zijing nodded. I think so too. However, we used the Southern Patrol as an excuse to sneak out. We can't stay outside for too long. We have to quickly find him. Mingyu's smile disappeared. He will. That senior said that Ji Ming Marquis is in the central continent, so he definitely won't be wrong. Humph, if I wasn't worried about that brat from the Grand Xia seeing through the clues and taking the chance to steal my territory, I really want to spend more time here, Mingyu said unhappily. She and that Xia Qi were both taught by bad people. Not mentioning other things, that brat's ability to hit someone while they were down was definitely not inferior to anyone. The current Xia Emperor is truly not simple. Purple Crystal agreed. To be able to restore Great Xia, which had many things to do, in just a few years, was not something that an ordinary person could do. It had to be said that the Marquis was truly an extraordinary person. He had single-handedly taught 2 emperors, each of them supporting the 2 strongest dynasties in the central continent. Currently, Northern Meng and Grand Xia kept each other in check. Adding on the existence of the barbarian dynasty, the 3 powers formed the most stable tripartite state. No one dared to easily start a war. As for the true extreme country in Meniang country, they were small places not worth mentioning. She had originally disagreed with Her Majesty coming out this time. The central continent was too foreign to them. It was easier said than done to find the Ji Ming Marquis. Chapter 511. In the 3rd year after entering the Sea of Demonic Wheel, the Emperor of Northern Meng entered Central State with only a 4th tribulation innate purple crystal accompanying him. Ning Chen didn't know. He was trapped in the void and couldn't escape. The endless darkness seemed to have no end. Countless days and nights passed in the cold and dark night. The brilliance of life seemed so insignificant in the darkness. Although Jiang Li's temperament had undergone a metamorphosis, she would still feel a bone-piercing chill every time she looked at the man beside her, whose expression had not changed at all from the beginning to the end. She didn't understand how cold a person's heart had to be so rational and calm all the time. They had been trapped in the void for at least a few months. Wasn't he worried at all? For the first time, she started to doubt whether the onlooker sees more of the game. Or maybe, in this person's eyes, even he himself was a chess piece that could be abandoned at any time. It had to be said that a woman's 6th sense was really scary. Jiang Li's feeling was very close to the truth. In order to resurrect the ghost girl, there was basically no chess piece on the chessboard that couldn't be abandoned, including herself. Ding! Suddenly, a familiar celestial music sounded in the distance. A faint 5-colored divine light flashed through the darkness. It couldn't be seen clearly and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Immortal Corpse Patrol. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. He waved his hand and took Jiang Li beside him. They turned into a stream of light and chased after it. In the void, the collapsed spacetime was the biggest obstacle. After a while, the immortal corpse completely disappeared. They couldn't find it anymore. The two stopped. Ning Chen looked at the darkness in the distance and narrowed his eyes. Unfortunately, it was a moment too late. Have you seen a real immortal corpse patrol? Jiang Li asked seriously. In the sky beyond heaven, there were legends of immortal corpses patrolling, but very few people had seen it. Looking at Jiang Li's reaction just now, he seemed to be sure that the five-colored divine light was a patrolling immortal corpse. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. He followed the immortal corpse into the immortal region and was very familiar with the five-colored divine light on the palanquin. He couldn't be wrong. In this place, he saw the patrolling immortal corpse again. It meant that the immortal palace was probably buried in the void. Let's keep going. Maybe we can find it soon. After saying that, Ning Chen didn't say anything else and continued on his way. Jiang Li didn't say anything and quickly followed after him. However, hope and reality were often the opposite. After the immortal corpses disappeared, the two of them traveled for another month, yet they still couldn't find any traces of immortal palace. The palanquin did not appear again. It was a coincidence. Once it appeared once, it would be hard for it to appear a second time. Why did you seek out the celestial palace? Jiang Li asked for the first time since they met. Save people, Ning Chen replied. Jiang Li frowned when he heard this and said, there are so many ways to save people in the world. Why place your hopes on the illusory immortal palace? I've tried everything. It's useless, Ning Chen said softly. Jiang Li was taken aback. A moment later, as if he had thought of something, he asked in disbelief, could it be that what you're looking for is the art of resurrection? Heh. Ning Chen smiled faintly and said, are you surprised? Lunatic. Jiang Li couldn't help but mock, you're also a cultivator. Could it be that you don't know that a person's death is like an extinguished lamp? Resurrection is simply impossible. In my previous understanding, the existence of gods was also impossible. Reality has proven that my viewpoint was wrong. Everyone's understanding has its limits. I don't know if the art of resurrection exists, but if I don't look for it, then it really doesn't exist, said Ning Chen calmly. Do you think it's worth it to take such a huge risk for this hopeless hope? Asked Jiang Li. It's not a question of whether it's worth it or not. Miss Jiang, perhaps there will be a day when you will understand that even if everything in the world can be divided into whether it's worth it or not, there will always be one thing that will make you spare no effort to do it, because that is the only value of your existence, said Ning Chen with a smile. I don't understand, and I don't want to understand. Your obsession is too deep. It's hard to escape the demonic tribulation, said Jiang Li coldly. Heh. Ning Chen smiled and didn't say anything else. He knew from the start that he couldn't avoid the demonic tribulation. He only hoped that when the day arrived, the ghost woman would have already woken up. In the following month, the two of them didn't say another word. Jiang Li had never thought that she would be trapped by a lunatic. Her luck really was terrible to the extreme. What was the most terrifying thing about a lunatic? It was that they were cold and indifferent. She didn't doubt that once this chess piece had no value, she would be casually tossed aside by the man beside her. How could a person who was so ruthless to himself care about an enemy? And just when the two of them had been in the boundless void for a year and 3 months, from an unknown location, a heaven-shaking rumble rang out. The entire world trembled, and in the immortal realms outside the void, another several hundred miles of land collapsed. This terrifying scene was truly shocking to the hearts of everyone. Oh! Within the void, Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. He took a step forward, quickly advancing. Jiang Li immediately followed. Her expression also became serious. They might have found the legendary immortal palace. In the depths of the endless darkness, several hundred miles of land calmly floated up and down. On the ground, an ancient and majestic immortal palace towered. Terrifying fluctuations continuously spread from the immortal palace, making one feel a bone-deep throbbing. Immortal palace. A figure walked out from the void. After more than a year, he once again stepped onto the ground. Looking at the enormous palace in front of him, brilliance continuously flashed through his eyes. Jiang Li also walked over, her expression full of shock. So the immortal palace really did exist. Miss Jiang, let's go. Ning Chen called out to the absent-minded woman beside him. He walked towards the immortal palace. Jiang Li recovered her wits. Suppressing the shock in her heart, she quickly followed. Since the immortal palace existed, then the legendary true immortal might also exist. Could a human's body really be cultivated to such a level? Jiang Li's suspicions increased. Perhaps this time, they would see the truth that had been buried in the endless years. The tightly shut immortal palace's door was made of an unknown material. It weighed over 10,000 jin. Ning Chen tried several times, but was unable to push it open. Forcefully break it open, Jiang Li suggested. Ning Chen nodded. With a wave of his hand, the Yama king appeared. His sword moved, and the 9 suns rose. With a single sword strike, heaven and earth changed. With a rumbling sound, the 9 suns shook the immortal gate. With an astonishing shake, the earth split apart inch by inch, sinking into the void. However, the closed immortal gate still didn't move in the slightest. Ning Chen frowned. He took a step forward and pressed his hand against the immortal gate. After a long time, he slowly said, "There might be a restriction behind the immortal gate. Let's work together and take turns attacking a spot to forcefully break it open." Jiang Li nodded in agreement. Her finger condensed origin energy and pierced it towards the center of the immortal gate. A finger pierced through the air and smashed into the immortal gate. The finger's power hadn't dissipated yet, and sword light soon followed. The two of them worked together to forcefully break through the restriction. Rumbling sounds rang out one after another, gathering at a single point. After a quarter of an hour, the restriction that couldn't recover in time finally couldn't endure their attacks and dissipated. Rumbling sounds rang out as the immortal gate opened. The two of them walked in, but after just a few steps, they heard the immortal gate tremble. With rumbling sounds, it unexpectedly closed on its own once more. A strange light rose up, and the power of laws gathered to reseal the immortal gate that had been broken open. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. Looking at the immortal gate that had closed once again, a hint of uneasiness flashed through his heart. In the east wing of the Zhao family in Zhongzhou, a girl in purple stood quietly, looking at the cold moon in the sky. Her expression was cold, without a trace of her past self. At this moment, red rain fell from the sky, and a beautiful figure in blue appeared. Her blood-red hair danced in the cold wind. The demonic butterfly descended, and the atmosphere suddenly froze. Butterfly in the flower, Zhao Yosu's expression turned serious as she said coldly. The demonic butterfly moved, and without saying a word, the black flower burial tears appeared again. With a slash, the surrounding void collapsed. Zhao Yosu flipped her palm to catch the slash. With a loud bang, the entire east wing instantly fell apart. The aftermath continued to spread, and the formations collapsed one after another, affecting half of the Zhao family. The reborn demonic butterfly's strength had increased to a shocking level. Even someone as strong as Zhao Yosu, who was at the peak of the Supremes, couldn't gain the upper hand. Seeing that the opponent was extremely strong, Zhao Yosu stomped her feet and flew straight into the sky. The wind and clouds gathered in all directions, and the vigorous vast origin energy condensed around her body, forming a crazy storm. The demonic butterfly's figure flashed, and with a slash, she swept into the storm. The flower burial tears slashed mercilessly. Zhao Yosu flipped her palm and blocked the slash again. The entire Bayou city fell into fear because of this shocking battle between supremes. The void collapsed one after another, and the moonlight was drowned out. The battle between the most powerful people in the world shocked all the innate experts within a few thousand miles, and they couldn't help but tremble. The blood-red hair in the storm was so dazzling. No one would have thought that the demonic butterfly would reappear and descend into the world. No one would have thought that the demonic butterfly would have the ability to fight against someone at the peak of the Supremes even though she had just entered the Supremes' realm. The slash danced, and the palms fell. The two people fought to the point of incandescence, and every move they made was with their lives on the line. A rare life and death battle between Supremes bloomed in the dark night. It was an indescribable battle. Everywhere the aftermath passed, the sky changed color. Liusu, who had endured the soul power of the Supremes of the Zhao family for 9 generations, and the demonic butterfly, who had reached the perfection realm, used the most powerful martial arts in the world. Butterfly dance, double rainbow. The demonic butterfly's sleeves fluttered, and the technique from the past appeared again, but with a completely different power. The black and white blades drew a beautiful double rainbow, cutting through the dark night and descending. Zhao Liusu blocked the 2 blades with her palms, and in the scene of the sky collapsing and the earth cracking, blood splattered everywhere. The Supremes of the Zhao family were injured for the first time. How dare you! The Supreme's prestige was irreversible. Zhao Liusu was furious, and her palms were filled with a vast energy. The surrounding black light rose and penetrated through the sky. A destructive technique appeared in the world for the first time. Dark clouds rolled, and 9 wheels appeared in the clouds. 9 wheels formed by the soul power of the Supremes appeared, absorbing the endless power of the world and pressing down from the sky. The extreme power descended, but the demonic butterfly's expression didn't change at all. She combined her 2 blades, and the blood-red light illuminated the world. Through the past and present, the only one in 100 generations, a blade in spring and autumn, a beauty that can topple cities. The demonic butterfly's extreme power shook the world. The blood-red blade light that suddenly soared into the sky forcefully absorbed the blade aura between the heaven and earth. It spiraled and surged, and directly collided with the 9 wheels that were descending from the sky. The most terrifying collision caused the space within a few hundred miles to collapse rapidly. The sky above the Bayou city seemed to have been hit by a divine tribulation. Chapter 5:12. The battle between the peak Supremes caused the world to be in chaos. Flowers were buried and the 9 wheels were dyed red, but the killing intent of the 2 Supremes did not decrease. The battle that was rarely seen in 1,000 years became the only color in the dark night, attracting countless gazes. The butterfly reappeared, but it was completely different from before. The black blade was filled with killing intent. Zhao Liusu activated the 9 wheels, and the soul of the 9th Supremes was added to her body. Every move she made blocked the fatal blade light. It was impossible to tell the outcome of the battle. The blade turned the wind and clouds, and the palm went against the 9 heavens. Magnificent splendor blossomed under the night sky. Every move and style was a peak ability. Butterfly dance. In the battle, the demonic butterfly's blade turned, and the wind and waves surged. Countless blood-colored frost appeared out of nowhere and fell on the battlefield. Flowers bloomed in the void, and one after another beautiful frost flowers bloomed. It was so beautiful that it made people's hearts tremble. Frost. The frost flowers collapsed and turned into the blade that buried the heavens. Thousands of blade intents erupted, and instantly drowned the 9 heavens. Zhao Liusu's expression changed slightly, and the power of wind and lightning gathered in her palms. She jumped into the 9 wheels, and the might of the heavens gathered. The 2 extremes collided, and blood splattered everywhere. Shocking shockwaves surged, and the 2 beautiful figures were drawn several zhang away at the same time. Blood dyed their clothes. The demonic butterfly was strong, but the Supremes of the Zhao clan were not weak either. They had the soul of the ninth Supremes, and their control over the power of heaven and earth far surpassed normal peak Xiantian experts. Both of them had unrivaled battle prowess, and in a battle of life and death under the night sky, their terrifying ability made people gasp in amazement. The battle reached its climax, and the illusory image of a dragon gate appeared behind Zhao Liusu. It almost condensed into a solid dragon gate, and an extremely powerful pressure spread out. The peak of power in the human world appeared. Seeing this, the demonic butterfly's body erupted, and her blood-colored hair danced wildly. Behind her, an illusory dragon gate also appeared, and its pressure was shocking, and it was on par with the former. The two Supremes clashed again, and the palm and blade exploded with earth-shattering power. In the shocking collision, the shockwave spread out, and the space cracked and spread out endlessly. The world turned into nothingness, and it was difficult for it to bear the two Supremes' power that surpassed the limit. The gods in the human world had already surpassed everyone's understanding. At the Golden Buddha temple at the foot of the mountain, Bodhi was comprehending the Tao in front of the demon-subduing pagoda. Two venerables were fighting and the world was in turmoil. The Buddha opened his eyes and watched the shocking battle. A middle-aged man in a white robe with blue patterns stood quietly in front of the Taibai mansion in the middle of the central continent. He looked at the battle in the distance, and his eyes flashed. Although the Zhao clan's prime master was young, his ability had undoubtedly long surpassed that of ordinary prime masters. He was practically invincible. What caught his attention more was that the seemingly demonized saber god was able to fight against a peak 9 heaven supremacy even though he had just become a 9 heaven supreme. It was difficult to determine the outcome of this battle. Did she come back for revenge? In the southeastern part of the central continent, in the Tu Li ancient realm, Tu Li's expression became heavier and heavier. Everyone knew about the oath she had made in front of the demonic will see. He had never thought that this woman would actually become a sovereign. If that was the case, then the sects in the Central Plains would be in big trouble. If a machete god who could compete with the Supreme Being wanted to take revenge, no one in the world could stop him. Thinking of this, Tu Li didn't hesitate anymore. He took a step forward and disappeared. This woman couldn't be left alive. They had already made a mistake by letting the tiger return to the mountain. This time, they couldn't make the same mistake again. In the Taibai mansion, Tu Li appeared. He looked at the middle-aged man in front of the mansion and said, "Mansion Lord Taibai, why don't we work together? Isn't Tu Li too impatient?" The mansion lord said calmly. "This woman has already become powerful. We can't leave her alive," Tu Li said coldly. "It's difficult to determine the outcome of this battle. Isn't it better to wait until both of them are injured and then clean up the mess?" The mansion lord said lightly. "If the Zhao clan's prime master loses, it won't be easy for the two of us to kill Hua Zhongjie," Tu Li said in a deep voice. Defeating a human prime master and killing a human prime master were two different things. If Hua Zhongjie wanted to leave, it was almost impossible for him and the mansion lord to stop her. After watching today's battle, it's not just the two of us who want to kill this woman. Let's just wait, the mansion lord said lightly. In the sky above the Zhao clan, the battle between the two sovereigns was getting more and more intense. The blood-stained void kept shaking under the extreme power. The butterfly that returned after 3 years came back for the promise. She would repay her junior brother with the blood of all the factions in the world. The injured Zhao clan's prime master didn't slow down at all. The 9 wheels spun and the wind and thunder surged. On the other hand, the demonic butterfly had the flower burial in her hand. Her saber was like a flowing cloud. When her sleeves flipped, the combination of hardness and gentleness made the world look at her. Under the night sky, the shadows kept crossing each other. Their grudges ended together. The saber and palm clashed. Their outstanding martial souls shone brightly in the sky. They had gone through thick and thin together. Today, it didn't matter if they lived or died. Butterfly dance, sky net. In close combat, the demonic butterfly used the god-trapping technique again. Her sleeves turned into an inescapable net and trapped the Zhao clan's prime master. The sky net pulled back the net. The blue sleeves that spread out contracted. The saber light was cold and ruthless. Ha! At the moment of crisis, Zhao Liusu shouted. Dark light coiled around her body. Rolling clouds rose and turned into 9 divine swords. The wheels were filled with power. Everything collapsed in an instant. The divine weapon broke the sky net. The sword blocked the saber light. The Zhao clan's Liusu used the power of inheritance that had never been seen before. The power of 9 generations of sovereigns gathered in one body. Endless soul power condensed into reality. The peerless divine weapon shook the flower burial. The saber and the sword clashed. The heaven and earth tilted. 3,000 rays of light cut through the night sky, creating huge ravines. The dark clouds gathered, but they were cut apart by the saber light. The cold moon appeared again. The confrontation of 2 extremes was accompanied by the celestial phenomenon. The world was frightened by a single saber. Zhao Liusu held the sword in her hand. The 9 divine swords danced in the wind. Every move had a familiar shadow. You'll only make me angrier if you use his moves. The demonic butterfly's slender hand slashed across the flower burial's tears. A bloody light dyed the black blade red. The space within 100 miles suddenly darkened. A rain of blood fell. It was bone-chilling. Dance of the butterflies, demon domain. The blood-colored domain spread out. Butterflies danced in the rain. The saber light became even faster. It was a dazzling saber. It was a death god. Zhao Liusu waved her sword to block the saber light. However, she felt her true yuan being suppressed. With a tearing sound, her clothes were torn apart. Blood spilled out. Within the domain, the Zhao clan's Liusu was injured once again. Fate played tricks on people of the same trade. The saber and sword cut off all friendship. The merciless divine weapon was covered in vermilion red. Saber and sword, the battle between kings since ancient times. Today, they clashed on top of each other. They interweaved with a magnificent aura of hell. It'll be difficult to take revenge for him. In the rain of blood, Zhao Liusu's footsteps trembled. Her hair broke free and danced wildly. The next moment, 9 illusory figures appeared. The Zhao clan's 9 figures opened their eyes. The blood-colored world immediately shook violently. The 9 figures were endless. They opened the demon domain and evened the battle once again. The saber and sword clashed. Killing light spread everywhere. It was difficult to determine the victor. In the strongest battle, each of them revealed their trump cards. The 2 people at the top of the human world had abandoned their past. It was impossible for them to coexist. Only death could end their grudges. A saber fell and a sword met. It was unknown who would be the last one to be dyed red. While the 2 were fighting, in the immortal palace far away, knowing destiny was in danger. The moment the celestial gate closed, the space shook and the surroundings suddenly changed. On the celestial path, the killing formation opened. The mirror light shone on the path to hell. Red clothes, black hair, and a purple divine sword appeared like a mirror. Without saying a word, the sword was fatal. Ning Chen's expression darkened. He waved his sword to block the sword. However, he felt a huge force and took a few steps back. All forms were no longer forms. Red clothes changed and black clothes appeared. Demonic chi overflowed into the heavens. The purple divine blade changed into scarlet red. The demonic technique shocked the gods, and its strength was extremely heavy. The 2 illusory figures danced in different sword paths. At the beginning of the battle, they showed that they had an absolute advantage. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward. His body was like an illusion as he moved quickly. The black clothes scattered and the red clothes appeared. The same speed, the same cold sword. Extreme speed against extreme speed. They suppressed the phoenix body. An unprecedented killing formation. The two bodies took turns and the sword opened the path to hell. On the other side, Jiangli was trapped in his own killing formation. The white figure shook the heaven and earth. It was ruthless. On the celestial path, the killing formation appeared. It trapped and killed the intruder. If he lost, he would die in one step. The killing formation that appeared at the same time was extremely fierce. The figure in the mirror fought two bodies with one sword. However, the two bodies changed silently. It was difficult to find the slightest flaw. The more they fought, the more difficult the battle became. Ning Chen's phoenix origin was greatly consumed. He stepped into the air. The 9 suns on his sword rose and slashed down. The same move appeared between heaven and earth. The 9 suns went against the world and collided with a loud bang. Blood stained the divine weapon. The aftershock made Ning Chen retreat a few steps. His right hand that held the sword dripped with blood. His eyes became colder. Sky shattering. The blood did not stop. The sword also did not stop. He slashed with the sword. 100 feet of wild wind roared out. The red clothes also used the sword form. The sword broke through the air and met the sword. The two moves shook the space. In the aftershock, the figure that passed by turned into a blade light and slashed down. With a clang, the demon blade appeared in the red clothes' hands. The blade light collided with the blade light. There was no flaw. At this moment, the demon blade in Ning Chen's hand suddenly flew out. It turned in an instant and formed a sword with his fingers. The sword pierced through the ocean of qi and came out of his body. The sword cut through the soul and the battle stopped. In this world, the person who knew him best was still himself. The knowing destiny sword was extraordinary. However, relatively speaking, his sword was still slightly better. Just as the battle ended and the two bodies disappeared, a change occurred. The incarnation disappeared and Bai Yi appeared. A powerful palm hit the heart. Ah! With a muffled groan, the knowing destiny sword took several steps back. The black tortoise heart armor that had blocked the attack several times could not withstand the huge force and finally shattered. The original incarnation had a shocking foundation and severely injured the knowing destiny sword. Blood flowed from the corner of Ning Chen's mouth. He took out an elixir and swallowed it. He looked at Bai Yi in front of him and gradually became serious. The next moment, the knowing destiny sword appeared. In the bloody sky, the blood-red patterns on the sword penetrated the arm of the original body. A shocking pressure spread out. The strongest body and the strongest sword reappeared in the world. The two swords clashed again. With a bang, the red clothes retreated and blood stained the sand. The shocking foundation was unshakable. In one move, the phoenix body showed signs of defeat. 9 suns burning the sky. In order to win, knowing destiny reappeared the Book of Sunday. The divine fire of 9 yang illuminated the sky. However, at this moment, Bai Yi's sword moved like spring and autumn. Frost surged. The Book of Life appeared. The divine fire of 9 yang showed signs of being frozen. The gap between the foundation was obvious at this moment. The two moves clashed. A pool of blood was spilled. The sword was red. The battle between the phoenix body and the original body was obvious. Chapter 5:13. Within Immortal Palace, within the realm of death, the phoenix body fought the true body. Yama cried out, purple light rising, illuminating the dark night. The illusory moon hung high in the sky. Within the realm of death where laws gathered, the battle between the two bodies had already continued for several hundred exchanges. The phoenix's extreme speed was unparalleled, its foundation unmatched. Speed and strength were both displayed to the extreme. The same body, emotionless eyes, Bai brandished her sword. The sword condensed water, fire, wind, and thunder. The aura of the source surged, its might rising endlessly. The terrifying aura of the source rose into the clouds under the moonlight. The most powerful sword made one's body tremble uncontrollably. When Ning Chen saw this, Yama gathered phoenix origin. Flames rose around his body. Sword intent erupted, spiraling outwards. Rising sun illuminates the east. Sword style, flowing heavenly scripture. A divine sun appeared in the world. Wherever the first rays of dawn arrived, sword intent followed. Sword collided with sword. The rising sun collided with water, fire, wind, and thunder. A heaven-shocking explosion sounded. The phoenix body retreated again, borrowing the momentum to leap up. In the air, a sword slashed out. Magnificent sword light shocked the 9 heavens. Nirvana. The sword of Nirvana reached the pinnacle of the sword. It turned into a stream of startling swords that streaked across the void, rushing towards Bai Yi. The most powerful sword approached her. Bai Yi waved her left hand. Sentiments appeared. The most powerful blade and sword gathered the power of 4 coils. Reincarnation revolved. The most powerful move faced the sword. With a loud explosion, Bai Yi retreated a step. Blood flowed out from her shoulder. The sword that entered her body was just a hair's breadth away. On the other side, the phoenix body retreated several zhang. Blood continuously flowed out from her arm, dyeing the Yama King's divine blade red. Vermilion dust scattered about. Knowing destiny staggered several steps. His extreme move was defeated, his injuries becoming more and more severe. The sword intent of this level was different. It tilted the scales of the battle more and more. Again. Ning Chen wiped away the blood at the corners of his lips. The yellow spring's divine restriction entered his body, sealing his injuries and maintaining his peak strength. In the next moment, the figure that approached rushed out again. The 2 swords collided again. One sword was fast, one sword was strong. The incomparable sword intent produced the most beautiful prelude to life and death. The body in the mirror, the figure in front of him, the same face, 2 people that could not coexist. The 2 swords fought until the heavens changed and the clouds became chaotic. The blood that spilled out dyed Hongyi's clothes red. Although Hongyi was strong, she couldn't completely block Hongyi's sword. The exchange of injuries wasn't equal, but it couldn't be stopped. Fast, it was still fast. Knowing destiny's state could only make up for the lack of foundation with speed. His sword was swift and hard to recognize. Amidst the endless red shadows, Bai Yi was as unmoving as a mountain. She used life as a supplement, and the 3 scrolls of martial arts took turns. Her powerful might suppressed the phoenix's extreme speed. However, Red Coat, who was moving faster and faster, did not care about his injuries. His speed reached the pinnacle of the human world. In an instant, he surpassed his peak. The true meaning of the sword is fast, accurate, and focused. Purely pursuing moves will only lead one to greater heights. Back then, at the end of the world, Mu Bai passed down the sword. A single sword split open the heavens, simple and unadorned. The extreme of the sword was boundless, and there was only one in the beginning. Sword, when he thought about it, his will came to an end. In order to break through the fate that he was suppressing, his red clothes calmed his mind, and his body dispersed. At the peak, there was only one sword, the most brilliant sword in his life. When the sword passed, it returned to reality. It was a sword that had never been seen before. Amidst its magnificent splendor, heaven and earth reflected each other. A single sword cut through space and time, and a single sword shocked the gods. With a slight crisp sound, the Yama king could not withstand the sound of the only sword breaking. With a glance, the broken sword entered his body. Bai dissipated, and the battle stopped. In an instant, the wind stopped, and a wisp of vermilion silently fell. Silence, it was still silence. It was so quiet that it made one's heart palpitate. Suddenly, blood spurted out from Redcoat's body like rain. After surpassing his peak, his physical body could not withstand it and gradually collapsed. Observing the sword, comprehending the sword, practicing the sword, and forcefully using the only sword that was not completed, in the end, he suffered a backlash. The killing realm dissipated. In the dusky immortal palace, Pobo's body was dyed red with blood. Yama King's broken blade fell to the side. Redcoat, who was kneeling on the ground, was bathed in blood and did not get up for a long time. Violent coughs sounded. Blood flowed out from Pobo's fingers. The life substitution talisman flickered, but a moment later, it was forcefully suppressed. It was not time yet. At least, Broken Sword supported his heavily injured body and staggered to the front of the broken sword. A trace of sadness flashed through his eyes. The phoenix appeared and swallowed the broken sword into its stomach. Yama King's sword was gone from then on. He practiced the sword all his life. He and the sword walked together for more than 10 years. Although Yama King's sword never acknowledged him as its master due to his cultivation, it did not reject him as it did in the beginning. Due to his limited talent, knowing destiny could not feel the sword's breath. However, after more than 10 years, every sound of the sword was extremely familiar to him. This was Yama King's sword, and also the ghost girl's sword. Knowing destiny inherited the sword. He and the sword walked together through every journey to revive the ghost girl. Today, the sword was broken. From now on, he walked alone. In the phoenix's shadow, the light on the demon knife gradually dimmed. The two weapons that shared the same life were both damaged. The moment the sword was broken, the spirituality on the knife also dissipated. With a bang, the killing realm was broken. A beautiful figure in white appeared. Her dress was stained with vermilion. Obviously, she was also heavily injured. "Are you out? Let's go." Ning Chen collected his thoughts and looked at the woman. He said tiredly. Jiang Li looked at the former and frowned. Something seemed wrong, but she could not tell what. Cough, cough. After a few steps, a violent coughing sound was heard. Ning Chen stopped. Blood kept flowing out of his right hand, which was covering his mouth, and dyed his red dress again. Jiang Li's eyes flashed with a sharp light. Jiang Li's injuries were so severe. "Do you want to fight? You have one more chance. If you fail again, I will not let you live." Ning Chen wiped the blood from his mouth and said. "Humph!" Jiang Li snorted and walked forward. She did not choose to fight. Against a lunatic who did not even care about his own life, it was not wise to act rashly. In this immortal palace, every step was unknown. She did not need to fight to the death with him. In the dim palace, the two walked forward. They did not know where they were going. No one had set foot on this path for countless years. Even the bones had turned to dust. After walking for a long time, a strange palace appeared in front of them. What entered their eyes was a huge heavenly lake. However, the water in the lake had already dried up. Not a single drop was left. Deity transformation pool. Jiang Li exclaimed in shock when he saw the shape of the heavenly lake. Ning Chen turned around and said, "Is the immortal transformation pool that Lady Jiang spoke of like this?" Jiang Li came back to her senses and said, "Apart from the size, everything else is basically the same." When Ning Chen heard this, his eyes narrowed. It seemed like someone from the sky beyond heaven had come to the immortal palace a long time ago. Let's go and take a look at other places. After looking for a while, Ning Chen turned around and left the palace. He walked towards the other side. There was nothing special about this place, so there was no point in staying. Jiang Li followed and continued forward together. The two walked for another 2 hours. While they were puzzled, the path ahead became darker and darker. Blood. Suddenly, Ning Chen stopped. He looked at the blood stains that covered the bluestone. His eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. Someone had come to the Immortal Palace. Jiang Li also noticed that something was wrong. Her heart sank. With the Immortal Palace's age, even the bones would have turned to dust. These blood stains were clearly left behind not long ago. The place where the blood stains were left was the only path ahead. The two had no choice but to continue forward. Their hearts were on guard. When the two reached the 8th hour, there was a fork in the road ahead. There were two similar paths that led to an unknown dark world. Which one? Jiang Li asked. Left. Ning Chen randomly chose a path and continued forward. Jiang Li did not say anything and followed. This was the first time they had come here. No one knew what they would encounter on these two paths. Thus, it made no difference to them which path they chose. Drip. Water dripped down from the Immortal Palace. In this silent darkness, it was extremely clear. The more they walked, the more wet the path became. It made them feel uneasy. Ning Chen walked a few steps and suddenly staggered. He spat out a mouthful of blood, dyeing the bluestone in front of him red. Cough cough. Amidst the violent coughing, red light rose. Ning Chen forcefully used his phoenix origin to suppress his injuries. However, blood rushed out from his body like a mist. His cracked meridians exploded, and he was instantly bathed in blood. Seeing this, Jiang Li's pupils constricted. He was not seriously injured, but was about to die. But why? With this person's ability, how could he be so seriously injured in the killing realm? If she could pass it, he should be able to as well. Jiang Li did not know that in the knowing destiny state, the mirror killing realm was several times more difficult than her. He had no choice but to use an unfinished move. After surpassing the peak, he died silently. There was an ancient saying, if you learn the truth in the morning, you can die in the evening. In the knowing destiny state, he had glimpsed the only sword. All his meridians had been shattered by the backlash. He only had 1 day left to live. How sad. You calculated everything, but you never thought you would end up like this, Jiang Li sneered. Ning Chen ignored her. He covered the blood that kept flowing out from his mouth with one hand and supported himself against the wall of the Immortal Palace with the other. He wearily walked forward. There was not much time left. He could not waste any more time. Jiang Li coldly followed behind. She wanted to see how miserable this person's final outcome would be. 10 hours had passed. Even walking had become difficult for Ning Chen, but he still did his best to walk. He did not say another word. Not far away, a black stone door appeared on the wall. It was inconspicuous, but it had clearly been opened. There were clear cracks on the wall. Ning Chen's gradually dimming eyes shone with an undetectable light. He supported himself against the damp wall and walked toward the stone door. With a rumbling sound, the stone door opened. What entered everyone's eyes was a shocking sight that shook everyone's hearts. At this moment, in the northern part of the Central Plains, in the sky above the northern imperial city, the two sovereigns who were fighting to the death had raised their strength to their peak. Their ultimate martial light shone brightly. The saber god and the demonic butterfly both revealed their peerless glory. The flower burial tear shone brightly with black light. A saber light soared into the sky. Above the sky, the void split open. Black butterflies fluttered in the air. There were thousands of them, and their terrifying auras made people feel a bone-deep pressure. Gyewu, Nether King. Behind the demonic butterfly, a pair of beautiful butterfly wings spread open. At this moment, the space within 1,000 miles of the northern imperial city seemed to be frozen. In the next moment, the saber light fell, and heaven and earth collapsed. Zhao Yosu's pupils shrank. She raised her chi to the limit. Her 9 divine swords transformed into a heavenly compass that blocked the attack. Ugh! With a muffled groan, the saber light shattered the compass and slashed across the purple-robed girl's body. In that instant, time seemed to stop. Blood filled the sky as the purple-robed girl fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. Chapter 5:14. After the defeat of the Zhao family's sovereign, Mo Dai's figure slowly descended. Looking at the heavily injured Zhao Yosu, she walked towards her. The cold blade of the Grim Reaper didn't leave any emotions behind. This battle didn't matter who won or lost, only life and death. Just as Flower Burial was about to claim her life, the great Sun Divine Bao Tower trembled. A terrifying arrow light pierced through the air, blocking the blade light. With a loud bang, the earth rumbled. Pieces of land collapsed, swallowing countless houses. Divine Soul. The demonic butterfly looked at the black tower in the distance, and coldness flashed through her eyes. Was the godly Bao protecting its master? Zhang Hua swung his sword, and a blade light broke through the air and collided with the black tower. Amidst an earth-shattering tremor, the 1,000-year-old divine tower collapsed. The divine Bao appeared, floating in the sky. Its dazzling brilliance lit up the night. The Bao that had protected the Zhao family for tens of thousands of years quickly awakened. Blazing white light shone like the sun rising from the east. Another arrow light shot out, piercing through the air. Noisy. Mo Dai swung her blade, shattering the arrow light. Her figure flashed, and she instantly appeared in front of the divine Bao. Flower Burial fell, and her blade cut through the divine soul. With a clang, the divine Bao shattered, and the divine soul within the Bao cried out before disappearing. In the Zhao family, numerous Xiantian experts looked at the shattered divine Bao in a daze. Their bodies trembled violently. The great Sun Divine Bao that had witnessed the glory of the Zhao family for tens of thousands of years was destroyed just like that. The fact that they couldn't accept impacted the hearts of every Zhao family member present. It was even more intense than the defeat of the Zhao family's sovereign. The Zhao family was famous for their bows, and the great Sun Divine Bao was the reason why the Zhao family was able to contend against the top sects in the world when they didn't have a sovereign. Who would have thought that in just one day, the sovereign would be defeated, and the Divine Bao would be destroyed? Hua Zhongjie, your killing intent is too heavy. Are you going to repeat the mistake of the Scarlet Demon? At this moment, the void rumbled, and a middle-aged man in a white robe with blue patterns walked out. His aura was as vast as the ocean, and he wasn't any weaker than the Zhao family's sovereign. The Taibai Prefecture's lord, the Peak Xiantian great cycle expert of the central continent, finally appeared and blocked Mo Dai's path. The world is in chaos. One wave of devil calamity after another. When did this world become so unbearable? At the same time, the Dragon Gate appeared, and a second figure appeared. It was a beautiful woman, and her cold voice did not conceal her killing intent at all. If you don't break free from the demonic tribulation and force your way into the autarch realm, butterfly in the flower, your path is over. After the two of them, another powerful figure walked out of the rolling black fog. Tu Li appeared and blocked the last path of retreat. 3 Supremes blocked the way. The demonic butterfly stood in the air and looked at the 3 human supremes around her. The blood-red light in her eyes was faintly discernible, and the murderous intent on her body became even more intense. Just as the killing was about to begin, in the distant ruins, the purple-clothed girl who should have been on the verge of death slowly opened her eyes. The light in her eyes was inexplicable and difficult to see. Immortal domain, within the incredibly damaged heaven and earth, an immortal palace had existed since ancient times, buried in nothingness, no one in the world could see it. Inside the immortal palace, in the dusky passageway, two figures looked through the black stone door. Their expressions were filled with shock. In the huge stone hall, 3 green coffins were lined up neatly, floating in the void. A terrifying pressure was constantly emitted from the coffins, causing people to feel fear in their hearts. Immortal? The two of them had the same question in their hearts. The aura in the coffins was too powerful. Stepping forward, the scene in front of them was even more shocking. The leftmost coffin of the 3 had already been opened by more than 3 inches. As far as their eyes could see, there was a vast ocean of nothingness, and there was no end in sight. Ugh! Suddenly, Jiang Li's body shook and he vomited a mouthful of blood, dyeing the ground in front of him red. In the vast ocean, countless figures stood in the starry sky. Their auras were connected, covering the sky and the sun. It was abnormally terrifying. The weakest of them was at least a half-step autarch. The auras of the people in the lead were so terrifying that it made people's hearts tremble. Even the stars in the sky lost their brilliance. However, even if they covered the colors of the sun and moon, and poured down the brilliance of the stars, they still seemed so insignificant in front of the figure outside the endless void. In the trembling void, a black-clothed figure stood silently. His face was cold and handsome, his black hair fluttered in the wind. His eyes that looked down on everyone were as dazzling as the stars, without a trace of color, holy and cold, causing everyone to feel a bone-deep fear. The Nether King, a supreme existence that surpassed the heavens and earth, personally descended upon the outer sky, causing the various starfields to tremble. In the immemorial war, the tragic war of blasphemy almost caused a starfield to collapse. Experts of the mortal world constantly fell from the starry sky, dyeing the stars with their blood. It was miserable, miserable, miserable. In the end, there was no doubt that the Nether King won. Almost all the experts of the mortal world had died in the battle, but they still couldn't stop the advance of the god. In the starry sky, the Nether King raised his hand, and large stars collapsed one after another. The aura of the origin gathered in the god's hand. Mountains, rivers, the earth, the vast ocean, in the void, a world formed by the origin of countless large stars slowly appeared. The Nether King created the world, shocking the outer sky. After an unknown amount of time, the 5 regions finally stabilized. At this moment, even someone as strong as the Nether King had a trace of exhaustion on his face. His eyes looked at the world he created, and a complicated emotion flashed past. I hope this world won't disappoint the god again. As soon as he finished speaking, the black feathers drifted away, and the body of the Nether King gradually dissipated. His energy was exhausted, and he returned to the 7 extinction celestial realm. In the starry sky, the newly formed 5 regions were so beautiful. There was no trace of filth, as if it was the most beautiful pure land in the world. After a while, 5-colored light gathered, and a seal appeared, sealing the passage between the 5 regions and the various starfields. From then on, the starry sky was divided into 2. There was the inner world and the outer sky. In front of the green coffin, Ning Chen, who had witnessed the creation of the world, sighed in his heart. Who was wrong between the god and the mortal world? What did you see? Looking at Ning Chen's expression, Jiang Li's eyes darkened. Why did she feel a tearing pain when she only saw a black figure? Could it be that she was worse than a seriously injured and dying person? The creation of the world. After speaking, Ning Chen looked away from the coffin and looked at the woman beside him. He said softly, "You can't be afraid in front of him." It was hard to say how big the difference between a human and a god was. If there was still fear in their hearts, they would even lose the strength to hold a sword. What was in the coffin was just a mirror image of the ancient times. The entire divine prefecture had experienced a similar situation. The despair that even the heavens and earth cried was still vivid in their minds. Judging from the battle in the ancient times, there were indeed some human cultivators who had surpassed the Xiantian full circle. However, it was still impossible to tell whether they were the legendary true immortals. Thinking of this, Ning Chen looked at the other two coffins. After hesitating for a moment, he walked to the one on the far right and slammed his palm. Jiang Li's expression darkened, and she quickly retreated. This madman. When the palm landed, there was a loud bang, and the entire stone hall trembled. In an instant, murderous intent filled the air. A terrifying sword light swept out and pierced through Ji Ming's chest. Ugh! He vomited blood. Even though he avoided the heart in an instant, he still couldn't block the murderous intent of the sword light. His phoenix body was in danger. Half of the stone sword rose from the coffin. It floated in the void, and a terrifying murderous intent surged, tearing the surrounding world apart. Sword of execution. Seeing the broken stone sword in the air, the two narrowed their eyes. Without thinking, they quickly rushed out of the stone door. However, it was too late. The moment the sword of execution appeared, countless formation runes rose from the stone hall, instantly blocking all the exits. Another terrifying sword light swept past, brushing past Ning Chen's right rib. A waterfall of blood splattered, dyeing the stone room red. On the other side, Jiang Li wasn't any better. His right shoulder was pierced by the sword light, and blood kept flowing out. The most terrifying celestial slaughter sword, in just a short moment, had caused the death of two peak powerhouses of the younger generation. At the moment of life and death, Ning Chen saw the green coffin in front of him. His eyes lit up, and he quickly rushed over. Enter the coffin. Jiang Li heard this and immediately rushed to the green coffin on the left, which was closest to him. Bang! The two entered the coffin and closed the lid, separating them from the murderous sword light. In the coffin, the flowing blood stained the bottom of the coffin red. Ning Chen's vitality was quickly draining away. The tribulation of Enlightenment realm had finally come. Violent coughs came one after another. It was so harsh that his groggy consciousness gradually became clear. Time's up. At the last moment, Ning Chen forcibly propped up his severely injured body. The phoenix spread its wings and rushed out of the green coffin. Whoosh! The murderous sword light pierced through the phoenix's body, bringing out a waterfall of blood. However, the phoenix didn't feel anything. The green cauldron blocked in front of it, and it directly rushed toward the sword of execution. Before it got close, the phoenix transformed into Ning Chen, who was covered in blood, and raised his hand to grab the sword of execution. Whoosh! However, just as Ning Chen was about to grab the sword of execution, the sword of execution shone fiercely. A sword light pierced through his body, cutting off his heart meridian. Blood bloomed. The hand that stopped slowly fell. Knowing destiny was silent, and his life was over. He was silent, and the sword of execution was silent. Suddenly, a change occurred. A dazzling golden light rose. Knowing destiny's life replacement talisman finally appeared in the world. The hand that was about to fall suddenly grabbed the sword of execution. Then, with one hand holding the half of the sword of execution, he picked up the green cauldron with the other hand, and smashed it down with all his strength. In the earth-shattering tremor, the sword of execution cried sadly. On the body of the sword, a crack spread horizontally and vertically, and it was about to collapse. On the other hand, the green cauldron was still intact. Its sturdiness made people speechless. The body of the sword was damaged, and the murderous aura on the sword stagnated. Ning Chen took the opportunity and formed countless seals to seal the sword of execution. The sword of execution shook angrily, and the murderous sword light broke through the seals. One after another, it forcefully cut open the seal of death. However, the temporary obstruction gave Ning Chen enough time to react. His figure flashed, and he brought the sword of execution to the front of the coffin. He threw the sword into the coffin, and immediately closed the coffin lid. After doing all this, Ning Chen heaved a sigh of relief. That was close. Fortunately, the green cauldron was there. Otherwise, even if he had 10 more life replacement talismans, it wouldn't be enough for the sword of execution. After the crisis was resolved, Ning Chen thought of Jiangli, who was also hiding in the coffin. He walked forward and opened the coffin on the left. His pupils shrank. What happened? In the coffin on the left, Jiangli's vitality was almost gone. In just a few breaths' time, her hair had turned white. Chapter 5:15. As time passed, 100 years passed in a single night. The moment the coffin opened, Jiangli opened her eyes and turned into a beam of light, flying out of the green coffin. Her vital energy rose and her face recovered. Her hair turned from white to black. However, the life force that had disappeared could not come back. She turned around and looked at the man beside her. Jiangli fell silent. His injuries had actually recovered. Ning Chen did not care about the doubt in her eyes. He looked at the leftmost green coffin and a strange look flashed in his eyes. What was in the coffin? Why did it devour people's life force? He turned his palm and condensed his vital energy. A divine sun appeared and entered the coffin. However, a shocking scene occurred. The divine sun fell and disappeared in an instant. Ning Chen's face darkened. This coffin was indeed strange. There were 3 coffins, each more strange than the last. In the middle, there was only one coffin that had not been opened. Its oppressive aura was faintly discernible. Even before it was opened, it gave people goosebumps. Ning Chen walked forward and pressed one hand on the middle coffin. He held the green cauldron in his other hand and was fully focused. If anything went wrong, he was ready to smash the cauldron down. Seeing Ning Chen's action, Jiangli suppressed the weakness in her body and flew out of the stone hall without hesitation. He had already gone crazy. There was no need for her to die with him. With a rumble, the coffin opened, and a shocking scene appeared. The coffin in the center was completely empty. There was only a blood-stained white robe lying quietly inside. Ning Chen squinted. A blood-stained robe had such a terrifying aura. What kind of existence was its owner? After thinking for a moment, Ning Chen's body shook. He glanced at the other 2 coffins and his face became serious. An empty coffin that contained the rules of time, a green coffin that sealed the sword of execution, and a blood-stained robe in the last coffin. Could it be that the things in these 3 coffins were all owned by one person? Then where was their owner? Also, the leftmost coffin had been opened before they arrived. What was going on? Did someone come in and open it? Or was there some other secret? The answer was difficult to understand. Ning Chen did not think about it anymore. He took a step forward and a huge phoenix shadow appeared behind him. It swallowed the 3 coffins. Red light and green light rose, and the situation fell into a stalemate. Other than the green coffin with the fairy-slaying sword that moved a little, the other 2 coffins didn't move at all and couldn't be absorbed into the phoenix's body. Outside the stone hall, Jiangli couldn't help being shocked when he saw Lin Fan's actions. Just what was this madman thinking? Drink. In the stone hall, seeing the green coffin move, Ning Chen let out a deep roar and pushed his martial arts to the limit. The phoenix spread its wings and concentrated all its power on the rightmost coffin where the fairy-slaying sword was sealed. Amidst the rumbling sounds, the stone coffin moved and was slowly swallowed into the phoenix's stomach. In the next moment, the phoenix phantom vanished. Ning Chen staggered. In just a few short breaths of time, he had lost all of his strength. After resting for a moment, Ning Chen glanced at the 2 coffins that he couldn't take away. He no longer lingered and walked out of the stone hall. He calmly said, "Let's go." Jiangli recovered from his shock and followed him without saying a word. Just how many secrets was this person hiding? Was that phantom just now the legendary phoenix? Ning Chen walked at the front, his eyes constantly flashing with a contemplative light. Something still wasn't right. The bloodstains he saw on the road clearly hadn't been there for long, so why hadn't he seen anyone? There wasn't even a corpse. Behind him, Jiangli looked at the figure in front of her that had recovered. Her expression was complicated. Fortunately, she hadn't attacked him before, or there really wouldn't be any room for negotiation. The two of them continued onward. Before long, a huge bronze wall blocked their path. There was no way forward. "Miss Jiang, step back," said Ning Chen. Jiang Li immediately retreated dozens of meters. Ning Chen summoned the green cauldron and viciously smashed it against the bronze wall. With a rumbling sound, the immortal palace violently shook. However, there was only a small dent in the bronze wall. It hadn't been smashed open as expected. Ning Chen frowned and turned around. He couldn't open this wall. Regardless of whether or not there was a path behind, continuing to waste time was meaningless. If you keep searching like this, even 10 lives won't be enough. Let me give you a word of advice, it's impossible to revive the dead, reminded Jiangli. Let's go. Ning Chen didn't say anything more and continued to walk forward. Jiang Li's expression became gloomier and gloomier. For an illusory hope, he was willing to give up his life. Was this lunatic's brain damaged? The road ahead was difficult, but it was the only way. Ning Chen was almost possessed. He had been rational all his life. At this moment, he finally let go of his excessive calmness and searched for a chance to revive the dead regardless of the consequences. Perhaps there would be times in one's life when one was impulsive. In the past, the Marquis of the Great Xia dynasty couldn't be impulsive and didn't dare to make mistakes. He could only remain rational all the time. However, today, facing what might be the last chance to revive the ghost girl, Ning Chen couldn't be indecisive anymore. He could only risk everything. In front of the fork in the road, Ning Chen walked on another road. His expression was cold and unprecedentedly determined. Jiang Li had no choice but to follow him. Her life was under control. The light in the dim immortal palace was getting dimmer and dimmer. Fortunately, their cultivation wasn't low. They could barely see the road ahead. After walking for a long time, blood appeared in front of them again. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. He walked quickly and looked at the blue stone in front of him that was stained with blood. His expression became more and more serious. Someone had indeed been here. The blood had dried up. However, the aura in the blood hadn't completely dissipated. Apparently, it hadn't been long. Ning Chen walked along the blood. From the blood, he could tell that this person was seriously injured. It was very likely that he was still in the immortal palace. Jiang Li followed him silently. The tiredness on her face was more and more obvious. The two walked for about 2 hours. The blood disappeared at a corner. Ning Chen stopped and looked at the darkness at the end of the corner. After a while, he walked inside. After 100 steps, the scene changed. It was a strange hall. Stone pillars went straight into the void. Under the pillars, a huge blood pool led to an unknown place. The horrible scene was shocking. In a different stone pillar, blood was still dripping. Beside it, half of a broken sword was inserted into the ground. The spiritual chi on the sword had almost dissipated. The longevity sword. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed when he saw the broken sword. He was shocked. In this case, the person imprisoned in the stone pillar was Ji Yaoguang, the King of Light. The Central Plains Sword God, a legend for 100 years. He could have become a supreme, but he chose to give up when he succeeded. That day, when the King of Light entered the demonic Wuxia, Ning Chen had seen the white-clothed king's elegance with his own eyes. His sword shocked the world as if he was an immortal. This was an expert that even human sovereigns didn't dare to provoke. How could he be trapped here? Was there an existence that could suppress the King of Light in this place? Could there really be an immortal in the immortal palace? Ning Chen didn't hesitate anymore. He walked to the stone pillar and pressed his hand on it. Since he couldn't figure it out, then he would save the King of Light. Everything would be clear then. Sword light rose and circled around Hong Yi. Then, it turned into a stream of swords and crashed into the stone pillar. With a boom, the stone pillar couldn't bear the extreme power of the stream of swords. Cracks spread out for more than 10 zhang. Ning Chen raised his head and looked at the stone pillar. His eyes narrowed slightly. Everything in the immortal palace was sturdier than the previous. Above the blood pool, although the stone pillar had many cracks, it didn't collapse. After a violent tremor, it calmed down. Out of fear of injuring the King of Light inside the stone pillar, Ning Chen didn't use the green cauldron to smash it. Instead, he used his fingers to break apart the stone pillar. Jiang Li looked at the man in front of him and didn't say anything else. Right now, even if he destroyed the immortal palace, it wouldn't be strange. Half an hour later, with a boom, the stone pillar in front of Hong Yi collapsed. A white-clothed figure appeared from within. His eyes were tightly closed as he slowly fell down. Ning Chen took a step forward and grabbed the King of Light. With a flash, he quickly left the place. Hong Yi stopped 10 zhang away. She gathered her true essence and examined the latter's injuries. Troublesome matter. A moment later, Ning Chen withdrew his hand. His expression became serious. The King of Light's blood had almost dried up. His lifespan was also almost exhausted. He was in imminent danger. To save or not to save him was a difficult choice. If he saved him, the price would definitely be great. Moreover, before the King of Light entered the demonic Wuxia, he already didn't have much lifespan left. Even if he was saved, he wouldn't be able to hold on for too long. It was unknown if he could even wake up. In this immortal palace, danger came one after another. Every bit of strength lost made it harder to continue. Ning Chen hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still chose to save him. Whether or not the King of Light could wake up, he couldn't give up on this opportunity. Ha! With a shout, a phoenix image appeared. A drop of blood flowed out from Ning Chen's chest. Within the dark red blood was a trace of gold. It was an extremely dazzling sight. Not far away, Jiang Li's gaze focused once more. It really was a phoenix. There was no mistake. That drop of blood didn't belong to a human. However, phoenixes were noble and pure. They hated humans to the extreme. Why would they give their phoenix blood to a human? The phoenix blood entered his body and a bloody light surged. The King of Light's blood that was constantly flowing out was replenished. One of his feet that was about to enter the gates of death was barely pulled back. Ning Chen's eyes flashed with a trace of exhaustion. Soon after, he gathered his true essence and poured it into the King of Light's body once more to help him recover. He had to do his best to awaken the King of Light. In this world, the person who could seal the King of Light definitely surpassed a sovereign. Perhaps he could obtain the answer he wanted from the King of Light. Time slowly passed. Ning Chen's phoenix essence was being consumed more and more. The King of Light's injuries were too heavy. It was almost impossible to save him. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to forcefully revive him. 1 hour, 2 hours. Ning Chen's red robes were soaked with sweat. In order to find the King of Light's whereabouts, Ning Chen didn't hesitate to pour his phoenix essence into the person in front of him. After 6 hours, the unconscious King of Light finally moved for the first time. His trembling fingers were very light, but they were very clear. Seeing this, Ning Chen increased his phoenix essence by another 30%. He gathered all his energy to help the King of Light awaken. After another 15 minutes, Ji Yaoguang finally opened his eyes. His eyes gradually regained their clarity. He looked at the youthful figure in front of him. A moment later, he weakly said, "Many thanks. Senior is too polite." Knowing that the King of Light wouldn't be awake for too long, Ning Chen didn't beat around the bush. He directly asked, "Senior, who sealed you here?" Chapter 5:16. The Alcade King was silent for a moment when he heard the young man's question, and then he said, "It was a red-clothed woman with a red veil over her head. However, I couldn't sense any vitality from her. She seemed to have died a long time ago, and she was more like a corpse god." Ning Chen's expression changed. A ghost woman? How could that be? The cries of the phoenix resounded. Amidst the rising phoenix silhouette, an ice coffin made of ice and snow appeared and flew between the two. "Senior Alcade, was the woman you saw similar to her?" asked Ning Chen urgently. "You know me?" The Alcade King's expression changed. When he saw the figure in the coffin, his pupils constricted. Exactly the same. Ning Chen's body involuntarily trembled. Was this the previous Rakshasa's daughter of the underworld? However, the ghost woman had once told him that ghosts could not coexist, so 2 generations of Rakshasa's daughters could never appear in the world at the same time. Just why? Not far away, Jiangli looked at the woman sleeping peacefully in the coffin. Was it this woman that made this person not even care about his own life? It was undeniable that this woman was so beautiful that she didn't seem like a woman of the mortal world. Unfortunately, beautiful women often had unlucky lives. "How do you know me?" The Alcade King suppressed a wave of dizziness and asked with his last bit of consciousness, "How do you know me?" "When Senior and the Grand Elders of the various sects were attacking the demonic Wuxia, I saw it with my own eyes from 5 miles away," said Ning Chen. "The younger generation will surpass us in time." With a final sigh, the Alcade King could no longer suppress his tiredness and fainted. Ning Chen was silent. He waved his right hand, and the ice coffin and the Alcade King disappeared into the phoenix. If the woman Senior met wasn't an immortal, then what about an immortal? Did she even exist? What kind of existence was that dead Rakshasa's daughter? Had she been refined into a corpse god? Ning Chen suppressed the disappointment in his heart and walked out of the blood pool. The hope that he had seen with great difficulty was shattered once again. After taking 2 steps, he saw that Jiangli wasn't following him. He turned around and frowned. Not far away, at the end of the blood pool, Jiangli stopped and looked ahead. He couldn't hide the shock on his face. Ning Chen turned and walked forward. Looking at the end of the blood pool, his eyes narrowed. Amidst the dim mist, the starry sky was so beautiful and vast. It made one feel as if they were standing in a star field and looking at the universe. "Sky beyond heaven," Ning Chen said slowly. "The brightest star in the west is the spirit void," Jiangli said with a complicated expression. "Spatial laws. You can see, but you can't enter. Given your cultivation base, you won't last more than 3 breaths of time before being torn to pieces," said Ning Chen calmly. He did not know where the blood in the blood pool flowed to, but just because the blood could be sent out, it did not mean that it could also be sent out. There must be some kind of connection between sky beyond heaven and immortal palace that he didn't know about. Perhaps, a long, long time ago, immortal palace was built by those who became true immortals in sky beyond heaven. Jiangli turned around and asked, "Have you thought about how to get out?" "No," Ning Chen replied. Jiangli didn't probe any further. It turned out that a rational person was even more frightening when they lost their rationality. Regardless of the consequences, they were no different from a lunatic. Right now, other than saving that woman, he probably didn't care about anything else. Bringing the dead back to life was as difficult as ascending the heavens. At the very least, from what she knew, this was absolutely impossible. No need to look anymore. "Let's go," Ning Chen reminded and walked out of the blood pool. Jiangli looked at the stars in the distance and sighed. She turned around and followed. She didn't know if she would have the chance to return to the spirit void in this life. Just as the two were trapped in a mortal palace, demonic qi rose up from the demonic will ocean in the southwest of Zhongzhou. It broke through the restraints and pierced through the clouds. At this moment, everyone in Zhongzhou was shocked and they saw the pillar of demonic qi that shot into the sky. He's not dead. In the sky above the Zhao family, the human sovereigns all looked back in shock. Seeing this, the demonic butterfly immediately flew towards the southwest without saying anything. However, as soon as it moved, 3 human sovereigns blocked its path. Move! The butterfly and the flower stared coldly. Black light rose up from the flower burial flower in its hand. So what if I don't move? Tu Li said coldly in the black mist. Then die. After saying that, the flower burial flower's light was black and red. The demonic butterfly moved and the saber light opened up the path to the underworld again. With a loud boom, Tu Li received the saber and retreated a few steps. He couldn't withstand the might of the extreme martial technique and the blood in his body started to boil. Blood dripped down from the corner of his mouth. Even a human sovereign couldn't stop the demonic butterfly from advancing. Seeing this, the Lord of Taibai Prefecture could no longer sit and watch. With a wave of his horsetail whisk, the Taoist sword appeared, and its cold edge was threatening to kill. The demonic butterfly sensed it and turned around to face the Tao sword. The saber and sword clashed with a loud clang. Murderous light overflowed in all directions. Torrential waves surged between heaven and earth, and the night sky within 100 miles swayed because of it. On the other side, Ji Qiuyu also moved. Her slender hand was like metal and stone. The 3 human sovereigns worked together to kill the demonic butterfly. When the killing move arrived, the demonic butterfly waved its sleeves and the flower burial flower appeared again. The white saber split and blocked the woman's 5 fingers. Dai Wu, Qing Ping. In the aftermath, the 2 sabers danced and Qing Ping waved her sleeves. Rays of death light shot out. The 3 of them retreated at the same time. A bloody mark appeared on Ji Qiuyu's face. Not bad. Seeing the opponent's strength, the Lord of Taibai Palace gathered his vital energy. Green light rose between heaven and earth. The Tao sword in his hand shone brightly and revealed his peak cultivation. Tu Li and Ji Qiuyu also activated their vital energy and raised their cultivation techniques to the limit. Suddenly, the night sky became as bright as day. The 3 colors of light were dazzling. The demonic butterfly's gaze turned cold. It shouted and shone with bloody light. Its blood-red hair danced wildly and its butterfly wings appeared again. Why did it hate it so much? Maybe it was because the people in the world were ungrateful. Maybe it was because the human sovereigns were kicking them when they were down. Maybe it was because it regretted its incompetence. His eyes were filled with blood-red demonic butterflies. His murderous aura covered the sky and covered the sun. When he opened his butterfly wings, they were black with a hint of brilliance. It was exceptionally poignant. It hated it so much that it was covered in smoke. The demonic butterfly moved and butterflies danced in the sky. The 2 sabers were 30,000 feet long. The 3 human sovereigns faced it head-on. The sound of the saber and the sword clashing cut open the night sky and shook heaven and earth. The Tao sword slashed across. The demonic butterfly's head was scarlet red. However, the flower burial saber's momentum didn't decrease. The Lord of Taibai Palace's arm was also stained with blood. The saber was won and couldn't be blocked. The 4 human sovereigns appeared together. It was the most tragic killing scene in the past thousands of years. It wasn't inferior to the Battle of Qi Lian who sealed the calamity 4,000 years ago. The 4 figures intersected in the sky. Blood splattered everywhere. Far away, at the foot of Swallow Cloud Mountain, in the Golden Buddha ancient temple, Lord Bodhi stood quietly. He looked at the pillar of demonic aura that soared into the sky inside. It was the first time he left the Golden Buddha Temple for the south in 3 years. The demonic calamity was coming again. The human world couldn't bear such a calamity. The kindness of saving the world couldn't be forgotten. However, the calamity couldn't be tolerated either. If someone had to die for being ungrateful, then it would be Bodhi. The Buddha, who had a firm belief in protecting the world, took steady steps. Although they seemed slow, they were astonishingly fast. Even the ends of the world were within reach, and one step covered 100 miles. In front of the demonic will ocean, Bodhi appeared and walked in. His Buddha power swept away all the corpses. A strange force appeared in the dragon burial ground. Black light rose and devoured the life force of the intruders. Bodhi twirled his fingers and Buddha light shone brightly, blocking the corrosive force. The black light and Buddha light clashed violently. The Buddha moved forward quickly towards the direction of the pillar of demonic aura. In the underground stone palace, the demon body was refining half of Xian Luo's demonic aura. It had reached the crucial moment. In 2 years, the demon body's cultivation had increased rapidly. His black hair had turned white and his demonic nature was shocking. The demonic aura sealed in the yellow spring was endless. It was as if the demonic aura that came from the sky beyond heaven was inexhaustible. On the side, the Qi Lian sword's red light became more and more dazzling. It had returned to its peak state. Amitabha. At this moment, Buddhist rain fell from the sky and dispersed the demonic aura in the stone palace. Bodhi appeared and walked over slowly. His white robe fluttered in the wind. His peaceful face didn't have many traces left by time. The world's strongest Buddha had appeared in the demon suppression stone palace. Qi Lian trembled and gave a warning. The demon body sensed it and opened his eyes. Jiming Marquis, you shouldn't have fallen so low. Bodhi sighed softly when he saw the completely demonized figure in front of him. Human nature is evil. What's the difference between a demon and a Buddha? The demonic body stood up and clenched his fist. Crimson drill entered his hand, and a monstrous demonic aura rose, its might terrifying. Bodhi's eyes flashed with emotion. He didn't say anything else and opened his Buddha world, sealing the demon body's path of retreat. In a single thought, Bodhi used his Buddha world saint move again. His Buddha energy rose and he didn't hesitate anymore. He used his killing move right away. The demon body snorted and took a step forward, circulating the endless demonic aura in his body. His sword released Buddha light and slashed at the Buddha. With a clang, the Buddha palm blocked the sword. In the next moment, Buddha energy spread out and destroyed the demon body. Blood spurted out and the demon body retreated a few steps. However, the endless demonic aura suppressed his injuries. More demonic aura surged out from the yellow spring forbidden land. While destroying the demon body, it increased the power of the sword. Buddha, you can't kill me. The demon body held his sword horizontally and slashed with his fingers. The demonic aura was like an ocean, making up for the gap in cultivation. He stepped forward and fought the Buddha again. The palm and sword collided. The Buddha beads wrapped around the sword, trying to lock it down. However, the sword's edge was fierce and a sword aura was released, threatening the life of the Buddha. Bodhi's expression turned serious. He pressed down the Buddha beads in his hand and pushed away the sword aura. His Buddha palm formed a seal and slapped at the demon body. The demon body didn't dodge. He condensed demonic aura in his palm and used his endless demonic aura to resist the Buddha's attack. In the rumbling sound, the golden Buddha world trembled. The battle between the Buddha and the demon instantly turned white-hot. Close combat was extremely dangerous. One was strong, the other was crazy. The demon that the world couldn't tolerate. The sword opened the path to hell, walking alone in the yellow spring. The stone palace that had been silent for tens of thousands of years kept shaking. The confrontation between the Buddha and the demon had lasted for a long time and reached its peak. Blood flame. The blood flame around the demon body appeared again. It was endless, and the fear of burning the world shook the world. At the same time, under the stone palace, Xian Luo, who was suppressed by layers of seals, opened his eyes. His body forcefully absorbed the aftermath of the battle between the Buddha and the demon, attacking the weakening seals. Chapter 5:17. The battle between the Buddha and the demon in the Ghost Bodhi Stone Palace was intense. One sword, one palm, both produced dazzling light. The demon that was reborn used its demonic aura to block the palm power of the Buddha. The excess Buddha power that could not be removed was suppressed by the demonic aura. The Buddha and the demon that were destined to be unable to coexist made their final decision today. Great waves and undercurrents stole the brilliance of heaven and earth, and the golden Buddha world shook violently. Facing the demon, whose strength was no longer what it used to be, Bodhi could no longer easily suppress him. Bodhi's thought, pardon sins. Bodhi pinched his fingers and gathered the clear saint force. The prayer beads shook and the Brahma rain turned into a sword and slashed at the demon in the world. Facing Bodhi's move, the demon's expression turned serious. Demonic aura circled around his body. The crimson sword shone brightly and faced the Brahma sword. With a loud bang, the Buddha and the demon's power clashed. The demon retreated 3 steps. His blood did not stop flowing. He counterattacked again. The sword broke through the clouds and bloody demonic flames roared out. Bodhi turned his palm to block the sword. He used his Buddha energy to stabilize the collapsing golden Buddha world. The intensity of the battle was incomparable to the past. However, the stronger the demon fetus was, the more determined the Buddha was to slay sins. He did not show any mercy in his attacks. Every move was filled with the determination to slay demons and slay sins. Demonic technique, bloody path. Bodhi showed his full strength. The pressure of the golden Buddha world suddenly increased. The demon's sword power changed. The sword opened a bloody path, using the demon to overcome the Buddha. The bloody path led to the yellow springs. Bodhi's expression also became serious. He wrapped his hands around the prayer beads. The golden swastika appeared in front of him and blocked the sword. In the earth-shattering tremor, the Buddha retreated. One of the prayer beads cracked silently. Seeing this, the demon's sword spun rapidly. He turned his palm to the sword hilt and used another 30% of his strength. The sound of something shattering was heard. The golden swastika dissipated. The fierce sword passed through the prayer beads and slashed at the Buddha. Clang! The Buddha's palm blocked the fierce sword. The sword could not move an inch. The Bodhi's body could not be invaded. Ha! A hint of coldness flashed across the demonic body's eyes. With a deep roar, he once again broke through several layers of the yellow spring seal in his body. Terrifying demonic chi surged out. Amidst the raging waves, his white hair stood up. It was as if a demonic god had descended to the world, causing the world to tremble. The Buddha was dyed red by the sword. He took half a step back and the devil took half a step forward. Holding the sword, he cut the Buddha with 10,000 pounds. Amitba. With a Buddhist chant, Bodhi gathered Buddha energy in his right hand and struck out with a powerful palm. The demonic body didn't retreat. Instead, it advanced. Demonic energy protected its body as it punched out, meeting the Buddha palm head-on. The close combat becomes more and more fierce. Drops of blood dye the world of Buddhism red. The demon knows that his personal ability is not enough, so he plays to his strengths and avoids his weaknesses. He uses his sword and palm to close the distance, blocking the Buddha's chance to make a move. With the move right in front of him, the time it took for him to condense his yuan qi was greatly reduced. The difference in cultivation base was no longer an absolute factor in the outcome of a battle. Experience and reaction time had become the most crucial factors. With a tearing sound, the sword edge sliced through the Buddhist robes, drawing out a smear of blood. The Buddhist palm imprint landed on the demonic body's left shoulder, forcing it back half a step. It was a close fight. Even though there was a huge gap between the two of them, the knowing destiny state cultivators who had gone through countless hardships in their lives were almost unmatched in terms of combat experience. The two offset each other and forced the unequal battle to a draw. Just as the battle between the Buddha and the demonic body was in a stalemate, the battle between the four supremes of the Zhao family in Zhongzhou had also reached the most critical moment. The god of sabers and the butterfly of demons displayed their pinnacle martial arts attainments. The flower burial twin blades fought against the three supremes. For a moment, the wind and clouds were in chaos and the nine heavens lost their color. The moon set and the sun rose. The battle was so fierce that it shocked the entire Zhongzhou. No one could believe that the butterfly of flowers, who had just fought against the supremes of the Zhao family, still had the strength to deal with the encirclement of the three supremes of the human realm. As the blue sleeves danced in the wind, saber light could be vaguely seen. One was black and the other was white. The twin blades shook the attacks of the three supremes one after another without falling into a disadvantageous position. Strong, so strong that it was shocking. The god of sabers, who could fight against the supremes of the human realm when he was in the half-supremacy realm, reached a shocking level once he stepped into the consummation realm. He could go against the immortals and fight against the supremes of the human realm head-on. The shocking battle finally attracted the attention of the experts in other regions. Northern Plains, Nanling, and the homeland of Western Buddha, many extremely powerful experts looked towards the north of Zhongzhou and watched the battle across regions. The ultimate of the martial path. In the homeland of Western Buddha, in the Divine Palace and the Demon Temple, two terrifying human supremes opened their eyes and looked at the butterfly of flowers countless miles away. Greed flashed in their eyes. In the world, there was almost no one who could achieve the supremacy realm with the ultimate martial path. Regardless of whether it was saber or sword, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to become the only one. 100 years ago, the Alcade king of Zhongzhou had this qualification. However, in the end, he chose to give up in front of the supremacy realm. Today, another supremacy with the ultimate of the martial path had appeared. It was really a fortunate thing. Above the supremacy realm, it was difficult to advance. If they could obtain the ultimate of the martial path, it might be of great help to them. Demon and Buddha, how about joining forces? In the Divine Palace, Zi Tiangong spoke slowly. Sure. In the Demon Temple, a gloomy voice came out and answered. That woman was extraordinary. One of them might be able to defeat her, but it would be very difficult to capture her. At the same time, on the western Jade Mountain, a bodhisattva with a calm face sat on a lotus platform and looked into the distance. A faint brilliance flashed in his eyes. The Western Jade Master, one of the three supremacies of the Buddhist sect, was one of the strongest people in the world alongside the supremacy of light and the supremacy of Bodhi. She was quietly watching the battle of the peak in Zhongzhou. Qing Ning, how long have you been on the mountain? The Western Jade Master asked after a long time. Beside her, the green-robed woman said softly, 3 years. Do you still have people you care about in the world? The Western Jade Master asked calmly. Yes, Qing Ning answered. Who? The Western Jade Master asked again. Family, Qing Ning answered. After today, go down the mountain with your eldest senior sister, the Western Jade Master said. Yes. Qing Ning nodded and did not ask more. In the ancient land of Chongling, the battle of the peak in Zhongzhou also attracted the attention of the female supremacy. In the light, a pair of beautiful eyes looked quietly at the battle in the distance and did not speak. Why have you come out? The female supremacy's clone who was cultivating opened her eyes and asked. A supremacy with the ultimate of the martial path has appeared in Zhongzhou. I am worried that the two people in the Divine Palace and the Demon Temple will act, the female supremacy said calmly. The ultimate of the martial path? That legend of the great Xia has reached the supremacy realm, the female supremacy was puzzled. No, it is the knife god of Zhongzhou, the butterfly in the flower. The female supremacy shook her head and waved her hand. The scene of the battle in the distance appeared in the world. The female supremacy looked at the red-haired woman in the battle and frowned slightly. She said in a low voice, "The demonic calamity has not ended, but she has forced her way into the supremacy realm. This woman is truly extraordinary." Speaking of this, the female supremacy looked at the white-robed figure who was still sleeping on the stone platform and not far away. She said, "This woman has some connections with him. If necessary, she can help him once." The female supremacy nodded and said, "The Purple Sky Palace and the Demon Buddha are cautious people. They will not act easily. However, if the two of them work together, it will be troublesome. Perhaps we can go to the eastern region and ask that legend to come out. He will not ignore his matters," the female supremacy suggested. Yes. The female supremacy nodded slightly. This was a feasible method. Immortal Palace, Underground Palace. The two bodies did not know of the butterfly crisis and were trapped together. They could not escape for the time being. The human supremacy was unshakable. The demon body fought one of the three strongest of the Buddhist sect. As the battle progressed, the demon body's injuries became more serious. There were also several sword wounds on Bodhi's body. However, the exchange of injuries was not equal. Experience and reaction were the biggest reasons why the demon body could fight to this moment. However, Bodhi was the strongest of the human world. He quickly adapted to the former's way of fighting. When the advantage was offset, the balance of the battle tilted again. The situation was unfavorable. The demon body waved its sword to block the Buddha's attack. With a bang, it took the opportunity to retreat. Immediately, it released all of its killing karma. The terrifying pressure penetrated the demonic will see and rushed to the 9 heavens. Demonic technique, Heaven's Tears. The move of breaking the cauldrons and sinking the boats made the sky weep. The sky turned blood red. Dark clouds covered the sky and thunder boomed. Dark clouds pressed down and the world shook. In the underground palace, the golden Buddha world shook violently. It was affected by the karma of killing and gradually collapsed. The resentment of the people that had restrained the Nether King in the past reappeared today. Although its power was far less than before, it was still terrifying. Bodhi felt the vital essence in his body stagnate. His body was seriously restrained. Bodhi heart meditation, Buddhism is boundless. Bodhi gathered his Buddha energy again. Rays of light illuminated the world. The swastikas rotated. Amidst the endless resentment, Buddha light rose and forcibly stabilized the collapsing Buddha world. Buddha energy, resentment energy, Buddha and sin collided at the peak. The rain of blood in the Buddha world was the heaven's sorrow. Scarlet Lotus ferocious aura also erupted at this moment to support the demon body. The move of breaking the cauldrons and sinking the boats couldn't be maintained for too long. The demon body stepped forward. The killing intent on his sword was endless. He wanted to kill the Buddha before the resentment energy was exhausted. Bodhi saw that the former was gambling with his life. He waved his prayer beads and used 70% of his attacks to block and 30% to dodge the demon body's sharpest light. How is it? Are you afraid? Or are you retreating? Buddha, your Buddha is watching you. How can you show weakness to a demon? The demon body's sword moved even more fiercely. At the same time, he mocked. Amitba. Bodhi was not provoked by the former's words. His moves were watertight. He blocked the demon body's final attack. Don't you want to know how Jian Bodhi died? Actually, the one who killed him was not the Nether King, but me. The demon body sneered. When Bodhi heard this, his mind shook. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. The demon body saw this opportunity and poured all of his devil energy into his sword. In that instant, time stopped. A merciless sword broke through the Buddha light's obstruction and pierced through his body. Ugh! Seeing a pool of blood, Bodhi retreated several steps. Blood gushed out of his chest, dyeing his white robes red. Buddha, I lied to you. The demon body sneered. The resentment energy and devilish energy flowed through the sword and into the Buddha's body. When the resentment energy and devilish energy entered his body, Bodhi staggered. He endured the pain in his chest and sent out a palm strike, forcing the former back. The demon body retreated a dozen steps. His mouth was red, but the smile on his face made one's hair stand on end. Bodhi, I can't kill you, but the current you also can't kill me. Properly experience these gifts that I've given you, said the demon body coldly. Pfft. Resentment energy and devilish energy erupted. Bodhi vomited another mouthful of blood. He knew he had to suppress the devilish energy in his body as quickly as possible. With rumbling sounds, the dragon gate appeared and he turned to leave. The demon body didn't stop him. Instead, his smile became even colder. Buddha, cherish your final moments. When you return to this world, perhaps your name will change. Bodhi has transformed into a demon. A human is no longer a ghost. How about Ghost Bodhi? Chapter 518. In the sky above Bayou City, the battle between the Supremes that affected the four regions was getting more and more intense. Blood spilled in the sky. The four Supremes were all injured, and their killing intent couldn't be concealed. Injuries were exchanged between their attacks. Demonic Butterfly's sleeves intertwined with her sabers. Her sleeves intertwined with each other like a dancing butterfly. However, the three Supremes weren't in the mood to appreciate her beauty. Their faces were solemn as they focused on dealing with the killing intent of the sleeves. The Tao sword shook the flower burial ground. The great white mansion lord took half a step back and waved his horsetail whisk. Demonic Butterfly sensed it and held the flower burial ground with her right hand. Blood splattered on her slender hand, and the saber was dyed red. Butterfly dance, frost. The demonic butterfly acted as if it didn't notice. The blade turned and forcefully counterattacked. Winds and waves surged, and a blood-colored frost appeared out of nowhere. Flowers blossomed in the void, transforming into a blade that buried the heavens. It erupted with extreme power, drowning out the 9 heavens. The great white mansion lord's expression turned serious. He activated his palm energy, and the Tao sword converged as he blocked with all his might. Heaven and earth were out of balance, and the aftermath spread out like a tsunami. The blood chi of the four Supremes started to roll, and they were forced back a few steps. Tu Li Wujiang, 3 karmic extermination. Seeing that they couldn't gain the upper hand, Tu Li Zun's eyes turned cold. He condensed a strange poison in his palm and slammed it out. Demonic Butterfly blocked the attack with her saber, but the strange poison spread along the saber. Demonic Butterfly's body was obviously slowed down. 3 karmic poison. Demonic Butterfly barely stabilized her body. Anger flashed in her eyes. She took a step forward and slashed down with the death saber. Tu Li Zun turned his palm to block the saber, but he felt an unstoppable force. With a bang, he was forced back a few feet. However, Demonic Butterfly's anger wasn't over yet. Her figure flashed, and she rushed forward again. Flower burial ground slashed down, and killing intent filled the sky. Ji Qiuyu and the great white mansion lord's expression changed slightly. They quickly moved forward to help. However, the saber light was unstoppable. Demonic Butterfly's left hand stopped the enemy while her right hand used the flower burial ground. Tu Lizun blocked the attack in haste, and a broken arm flew up and slashed across his chest. Blood splattered all over the sky. Ugh! Tu Lizun was heavily injured and his clothes were dyed red. He took a few steps back and vomited blood. At the same time, Ji Qiuyu and the chief of Tai Bai Mansion had arrived to help. The force of their palms and the edge of their swords were threatening to kill. The demonic butterfly raised its primordial energy to block two attacks. Suddenly, it felt its true qi stagnate, its primordial energy was not flowing smoothly, and its moves were already 30% weaker. The next moment, the palm, the sword, and the saber clashed. Butterfly retreated a few steps, her mouth red. Butterfly in the flower, your foolish struggle is useless. Put down the blade in your hand and perhaps we can spare your life. Ji Qiuyu coldly snorted. Stop dreaming. The demonic butterfly wiped away the blood from the corners of her lips. She took a step forward and forcefully summoned the last of her essence. Her meridians surged in reverse, and a terrifying pressure swept outwards. She was prepared for a life or death struggle. When Ji Qiuyu and the Great White Prefecture's Mansion Master saw this, their expressions turned grave. The final sound of the battle arrived. The three of them raised their cultivation to the peak of their lives. The three-colored brilliance illuminated the heaven and earth, and shook 1,000-li dance of the butterflies, spring and autumn. The two sabers rotated, and the spring and autumn obelisk gathered the last of their primordial energy into their hands. In an instant, killing intent surged in all directions. Red waves of blood surged out, and two rainbows slashed towards the two venerables. Before the final move, the Great White Prefecture's Mansion Master turned his sword. Vast primordial energy circulated, and the heaven and earth's spiritual energy supported him. Great White's unique skill reappeared in the world. The path of the mortal world, one absolute move. The path sword shook the blood waves, and the wind and clouds fell from the 9 heavens. The Great White Prefecture's Mansion Master's mouth was dyed red, and he was forced back a dozen steps. On the other side, Ji Qiuyu also found it difficult to block the final destructive power. She was forced back a dozen feet, and blood fell like rain. Ah! After the final move, the demonic butterfly's figure suddenly staggered. The 3 karmic killing poison burst out. The saber god, who had lost the protection of his primordial energy, was in imminent danger. Butterfly in the flower, you're finished. Ji Qiuyu forcefully suppressed her injuries. She stepped forward, and her slender hand turned into a sharp blade. With the poison in her body, the demonic butterfly's life force was quickly draining away. However, she knew that if she lost here, it would be farewell forever. The saber god barely summoned some strength to block the killing move. With a violent tremor, the blood-stained blue robe flew out. She took advantage of the momentum and quickly retreated. If you want to step out of the death calamity, you have to ask if the path sword in my hand is willing to do so. The Great White Prefecture's Mansion Master's expression turned cold. He rushed forward, and the sword pierced 3 inches into the demonic butterfly's body. The demonic butterfly let out a muffled groan. The saber god's Mansion Master blocked the sword that was threatening to kill her. The butterfly in the flower will not fall here. If I want to live, no one can stop me. The demonic butterfly's eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. She ignored the saber god's Mansion Master's Mansion Master and stepped forward. With a piercing sound, the saber god's Mansion Master's Mansion Master's Mansion Master's Mansion Master's Mansion Master was forced to retreat. The path sword was restrained, and the Great White Prefecture's Mansion Master was unable to counterattack in time. The demonic butterfly did not miss this opportunity. She summoned the Dragon Gate, stepped into it, and disappeared. The battle ended. The 9 heavens were dyed red with blood. The collapsed void gradually recovered. This was the most tragic battle in 100 years. The three venerables joined forces, but they were still defeated on the verge of success. The four regions were shocked. Pft. In the silent battle, the great white prefecture's mansion master and Ji Qiuyu both vomited blood. Their expressions were unusually dark. They could not keep this woman here. If they met again in the future, she would be even more difficult to deal with. In the homeland of West Buddha, the female supreme who had watched this shocking battle waved her hand to disperse the screen of light. She looked at Knowing Destiny, who had been sleeping on the stone platform for 3 years, and sighed inside. This person had deliberately avoided owing favors his entire life. However, the heavens always played tricks on people. The more unwilling they were, the more they would not get what they wanted. Outsiders saw him as cold and heartless, but he was willing to give everything to the people around him. Putting himself in their shoes, he owed more and more favors. People had to be a little foolish. Treating people with sincerity would be treated with sincerity. How much lifespan does his body have left? The female supreme asked after coming back to her senses. Less than 10 years, the female supreme said softly. In order to stop the Nether King from destroying the world, Knowing Destiny borrowed time from the heavens to form his foundation. This body did not have much lifespan left. Also, in order to cultivate the life scroll again, the flow of time was clearly faster than outside. He cultivated for 10 years in the forbidden lands of Chongling. His lifespan was consumed again. Now, he was a lamp without oil. Hearing this, the female supreme fell silent. A long time later, she said, think of a way to extend his life. At least, before he completes his last wish, do not let this body become a burden to his other 2 avatars. Lifespan is determined by the heavens. It is difficult to change it. The female supreme sighed softly. Now, he had not lost his life due to serious injuries, but his lifespan was exhausted. The cycle of life and death was the most difficult to reverse. Extending a person's lifespan was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Try to think of a way. If there is no other way, seal this body and forever suppress it under Changling's destiny, the female supreme said. The female supreme stilled and then sighed. This was the only way. The matter of the butterfly and the flower cannot be delayed. I will go to the divine lands. Chongling will be in your hands, the female supreme said. Do not worry. The female supreme nodded. After giving instructions, the female supreme did not linger. In the 5-colored light, the dragon gate appeared. She entered it and headed east. On West Jade Mountain, 2 beautiful figures walked down the mountain. One was dressed in Buddhist robes, the other in green robes. The Buddhist robes were flawless, and the woman's face was delicate. Her long hair was tied behind her back. She was not stunning, but she gave people an indescribable feeling. She was calm and peaceful, without the pressure of a cultivator. The eldest senior sister on the mountain, Bilingling, was also the first disciple to come up the mountain. Her talent was not as good as the junior sisters who came up the mountain later, and could not compare to the monstrous woman who was ranked 3rd. However, the strongest person on the mountain was still the eldest senior sister because of her calm heart. In comparison, the most terrifying 3rd senior sister on the mountain was the 3rd senior sister. Although her strength was 2nd, she was the person who disliked cultivation the most. Qing Ning, why did you come to the homeland of West Buddha? Bai Lingling asked. Every disciple on the mountain liked this little junior sister who came up the mountain last. She did not speak much, but was the most diligent. She learned from her master that her little junior sister came from the distant eastern domain, the forbidden land where the gods descended. To find someone, Qing Ning replied. Someone you like? Bai Lingling asked. Qing Ning shook her head gently and said, family. The word like was too heavy for them. Ever since he entered the summer palace and she brought him to the empress, they were family. Did you find him? Bai Lingling asked again. No, he has his own things to do. Now is not the time to meet him, Qing Ning replied. In the endless void, there was a floating land. An ancient and majestic palace sat on top of it. It had been tens of thousands of years. Inside the palace, Zhi Ming was still trying his best to find the immortal. Jiang Li followed him, and it became quieter and quieter. The two of them walked for another 3 days. During this time, they encountered a lot of trouble. One time, because they lost their bearings, they accidentally entered a killing formation and almost died. During these 3 days, the 100-flower pills poison flared up more and more frequently in Jiang Li's body. Every time the poison flared up, his injuries became more serious. Ning Chen still did not detoxify him. His heart was made of iron and stone, and he was not merciful at all. He had already experienced the hostility of the realm beyond heaven toward the inner realm. At this critical moment, he could not afford to make any mistakes. He did not want to regret it for the rest of his life because of a moment of soft-heartedness. Jiang Li was also aware of their current situation. He suppressed the hatred in his heart and secretly searched for a way out. Finally, on the 6th day since the two of them arrived, a ray of light appeared in the palace that was filled with killing intent. At the end of the path, heaven and earth changed. A world within a world appeared before them. It was not very big, and there was only one celestial mountain. It was as if a powerful cultivator had moved it here from somewhere else. Even though the space around it had withered over the years, the celestial mountain in the center still maintained an immortal vitality. The two of them stopped in front of the celestial mountain and looked at the peach tree beside the lake. Their eyes shone with a dazzling brilliance. This is the Jade Lake, and the undying peach tree. The lake water had already dried up, but they could still feel the vitality of the peach tree. It was as vast as the sea, and it was shocking. According to the legends, there was a celestial mountain in the celestial world. There was a peach tree in front of the mountain that was irrigated by the Jade Lake's water. It bloomed once every 3,000 years, bore fruit once every 3,000 years, and ripened once every 3,000 years. When the fruit ripened, it could seize the fortune of heaven and earth and reverse reincarnation. It could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones. However, legends were just legends. No one expected that the undying peach tree really existed. Jiang Li recovered from his shock and looked at the man beside him. He had found the undying peach tree. However, without the Jade Lake's water and 9,000 years of time, how could he bring that woman back to life? Chapter 519. With the undying peach tree in front of him, Ning Chen walked over step by step. There was nothing unusual about his expression. However, his hands were clenched so tightly that they had turned white. It was obvious that he was not as calm as he appeared to be. For more than 10 years, day after day, night after night, the ghost girl's bloody smile as she passed away constantly echoed in his mind. He owed her something that he would never be able to taste in his entire life. Beside the nacre lake, the peach tree had been growing for tens of thousands of years. The spirit chi in this small world had dried up, and the peach tree had fed it back, barely allowing this small world to survive until today. However, several parts of the immortal peach tree's branches could be seen withering. Perhaps if he had come 100 years later, the undying immortality peach tree would have withered completely. Ning Chen stood under the tree for a long time. He touched the trunk of the peach tree with his right hand and felt the spiritual energy of life in it. He was speechless. Such an astonishing concentration of life force was truly not something that any great medicine in the mortal world could compare to. However, in order to water this tree, one would need the water of the Jade Lake, which was hard to find in the mortal world. The Jasper Lake had already dried up, so where was he going to find Jasper Lake water? Phoenix blood might be able to replace it, but his spiritual energy was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood to this tree. It wouldn't be of any use. Have you thought of a way? This world isn't far from its collapse, and this tree will quickly wither and die if it stays here. So, instead of wasting time here, it's better to think of a way to leave this place and transplant the peach of immortality tree to a suitable place to grow, Jiang Li suggested. Ning Chen was silent. After a long time, he came to his senses. He flipped his palm, condensed nascent energy, and slammed it down onto the ground in front of him. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the ground started to crack. The phoenix appeared and opened its mouth. A powerful suction force appeared and sucked the immortality peach tree into the phoenix's body. The divine tree was taken away. Inside the small world, heaven and earth shook violently, showing signs of collapse. Go! Ning Chen called out to Jiang Li, and then he swiftly walked out of the pocket world. Jiang Li followed after him, and a strange look flashed across his eyes. Had this person finally regained his rationality and was thinking of a way to get out? The two of them retraced their steps, and not long after they stepped out of the small world, the heavens and earth behind them collapsed and were completely obliterated in the passage of time. After walking out of the small world, the two of them were presented with two paths. They could either return to where they came from, or they could continue forward and finish the rest of the journey. Jiang Li naturally advocated going back the way they came. She had already personally experienced the dangers of Immortal Palace. If she continued, she didn't know when she would lose her life. Unfortunately, the decision was not in her hands. Ning Chen chose to continue moving forward. The appearance of the immortality peach tree made him even more determined to find the celestial realm. If the legends were true, then the existence of the celestial realm might not necessarily be a myth. At the very least, he had to try to find the origin of the myths and legends. For example, the water of the Jade Lake and the immortal peach tree. A mortal could not wait for 9,000 years. The headmaster had surpassed the pinnacle of cultivation in the mortal world, but he had managed to survive for more than 1,000 years. The immortal peach tree alone could not save the ghost lady. He needed the water of the jade pool, but he also needed time. In the inner realm, in the eastern divine land, the void swirled and the female supreme walked out. She looked at the land that was gradually recovering after the divine tribulation, and her expression was inexplicably complicated. It was hard to imagine what kind of calamity would have happened if the god-sending battle had failed and the Nether King had stepped in to pull the four regions back. However, the cultivators of the divine land who had saved the mortal world in the past had suffered too much karma. The continuous disasters made people sigh. In the imperial city of the Great Xia, in the manor of the Marquis of Jiming. Although the Marquis had left, the manor of the Marquis of Jiming remained. After the end of the Divine War, the manor of the Marquis of Jiming supported the entire Great Xia. The manor of the Marquis of Jiming had become the spiritual pillar of the Great Xia. Even if the Marquis was not there, the manor of the Great Xia could not be shaken. Ningxi would occasionally come back to stay for a few days, and then she would go to the southern border again. Like the most ordinary woman, she would quietly accompany her husband. In the north of the Great Xia, after Kong Yu was made a marquis, he rarely came back. He remembered the teachings of the marquis and tried his best to protect the territory of the Great Xia behind him. The legend of the Marquis of Jiming continued. Just like the Marquis of Triumphant Return and the Marquis of Bloodrobed had done their best to support the Marquis of Jiming. The inheritance had never been broken. Above the imperial city, the Dragon Gate appeared and the female supreme appeared. She glanced at the manor of the Marquis of Jiming below and then flew toward the northwest. It was raining during the Qingming festival. In the northwest of the imperial city, in front of the Zhangsun Mausoleum, the legend stood quietly. Not far away, Xia Qi and Xia Xinyu accompanied him to sweep the tomb. The light rain fell on the body, making it slightly cold. The legend of the Great Xia stood quietly in front of the tomb as if he didn't feel it. He stood there for several hours. Just then, not far away, a ray of light gathered and a beautiful figure walked out. Unparalleled pressure shocked the two people present. Xia Qi's expression turned serious. Just as he was about to stand in front of her, he was stopped by Xia Xinyu. You are now the Empress of the Great Xia. Your life represents not only yourself. Don't put yourself in danger so easily. Xia Xinyu scolded softly. Then she looked away and said to the woman in front of her, Miss, may I ask why you are here? I'm here to see the legend of the Great Xia, the female supreme said calmly. Miss, please wait a moment. Uncle won't see anyone now, Xia Xinyu said politely. Okay. The female supreme nodded in response. The light rain in front of the tomb soaked the robes of the legend. King Yan of the Great Xia, who had pursued the pinnacle of the sword all his life, loved the sword, searched for the sword, and proved the sword. However, when had the heart of a swordsman been moved by the world of mortals? Time did not leave a mark on the face of the legend. His young and handsome face had not changed at all, just like 30 years ago. The world of mortals was far away. All that was left was the one on the sword. Time only left a name, not mercy. With the sound of the sword, the legend turned around and looked at the woman waiting patiently not far away. He said, I've waited for a long time. What is your name? Chongling, Nucheng, the female supreme replied. Hearing this, a strange look appeared in King Yan's eyes. The homeland of West Buddha, the female supreme of Chongling. In other words, the person who had saved that boy 13 years ago was the woman in front of him. I will remember female supreme's kindness of saving my junior's life. If you have any requests, female supreme can speak directly, King Yan said calmly. He has returned the favor. I'm here for another matter, the female supreme said. Oh. Please speak clearly, King Yan said. Blade god Hua Zhongjie of Central Plains fought against all the sects in the world for Jiming Marquis and was seriously injured. Now, she may be targeted by those two from Shen Palace and Yao Temple. Her life may be in danger at any time, the female supreme said with a serious expression. Where is Ning Chen? Why did he not help? King Yan frowned slightly and asked. 3 years ago, he was forced into the demon will see by the Central Plains sects and has not come out since, the female supreme said with a sigh. Hearing this, King Yan's calm expression immediately turned cold. Very good. Just as the legend and the female supreme were meeting, the two people who had walked for several days in the immortal palace in the void gradually reached a dead end. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The immortal palace seemed to have reached the end. Looking up, it was dark and silent. Suddenly, the immortal palace started to shake violently again, even more violently than the time they had felt in the void. Amidst the shaking, 3 dragon corpses appeared nearby. In the divine light, the immortal palanquin arrived, causing the void to tremble. Immortal Corpse Patrol. This was the first time Jiangli had seen it with his own eyes. His body trembled violently. It turned out that the divine light they had seen in the void was the trace of the Immortal Corpse Patrol. Get out of the way, don't block the way. Ning Chen reminded and quickly made a path. The scene of the ghost soldiers was still vivid in his mind. The Immortal Corpse Patrol was even more terrifying than the Grim Reaper. They could not provoke it. Hearing Ning Chen's words, Jiangli came back to his senses and immediately moved out of the way without thinking. The next moment, the dragon corpses opened the way and the palanquin moved forward, leaving in front of the two people. Looking at the palanquin, Ning Chen did not hesitate. He stepped forward and quickly followed it. Maybe the place the Immortal Corpse Patrol went to could answer the question in his heart. Seeing Ning Chen move, Jiangli immediately followed and quickly chased after him. In front of them, the 3 dragon corpses broke through layers of the void and moved faster and faster. Behind them, the two people were gradually pulled apart and were about to lose them again. Hold on to me. With a shout, Ning Chen transformed into a phoenix and moved at extreme speed. The phoenix spread its wings and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The void rolled and the immortal corpse patrol entered. Before the void closed, the phoenix rushed in and did not pull away. The changes in the world became more and more frequent. The great cultivators of the immortal domain had opened up many unknown worlds. However, the entrances were unknown and difficult to enter. In just a few breaths of time, the immortal corpse patrol passed through layers of worlds and brought the two of them to see too much scenery that they had never seen before. Although it was just a moment, it was enough to remember for a lifetime. Just as the last world disappeared, the reflection of an unknown number of years ago appeared in the world. In the immortal domain that was gradually collapsing, a white-clothed figure stood there quietly. He raised his head and looked at the collapsing void in the sky silently. Immortal. Such a clear feeling, there was no doubt. Ning Chen's pupils shrank fiercely. At this moment, he no longer had any doubts. Strong, so strong that it made him feel like he was facing the Nether King again. However, the silence of that white-clothed figure was so heavy that it made it hard for him to breathe. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were already in an unfamiliar starry sky. It was a beautiful star field with countless nebulas. It was a dazzling rainbow that made people intoxicated. Ning Chen's expression changed. This was the heavens beyond the heavens. In this star field, there was a bright star that was so dazzling. When Jiangli saw it, she became excited. It was Spirit Void. Now that we've left the immortal domain, it's time for you to fulfill your promise. Jiangli suppressed her excitement. The phoenix transformed into a red-clothed figure. With a flip of her hand, a violet medicinal pill appeared and flew toward Ning Chen. The antidote, said Ning Chen calmly. Jiangli took the medicinal pill and swallowed it. Then she circulated her cultivation technique to activate the medicinal energy. The antidote was real. In the blink of an eye, the majority of the 100 flowers poison had dispersed. The remaining poison was also slowly disappearing under the medicinal energy. Miss Jiang, thank you for accompanying me these days. If fate allows it, we'll meet again. Ning Chen glanced at the palanquin in front of him. Without wasting any more time, he quickly chased after it. Tell me your name, said Jiangli loudly. By Yujing. Chapter 520. In the homeland of West Buddha, in the ancient land of Chongling, space shook and light gathered. The female supreme who had gone to the eastern domain had returned. Not far from the stone platform where Su Yi was sleeping, the female supreme leader opened her eyes and looked at the figure in the air. She said, "How is it, did you invite her?" "Yes." The female supreme leader nodded and said, "The legend of Xia has gone to Central Plains. I was worried that the demon Buddha and the purple heavenly palace would do something, so I came back first. They have not done anything. However, with Ji Yuan's appearance, they cannot keep silent. If this woman was not related to the knowing Ming Marquis, I think that even you and I would not be tempted," the female supreme leader said. "There are things to do and things not to do. Since he kept his promise and did not hesitate to give up his life and freedom, we cannot do anything to disappoint him," the female supreme said. The female supreme leader sighed softly and looked at the sleeping figure on the stone platform. She said, "His body is losing life faster and faster. Make a decision quickly and suppress it under Chongling's destiny. Then we can ensure that the other two bodies will not be affected." Hearing this, the female supreme's expression turned serious. She said, "Wait a little longer. Unless it is absolutely necessary, we cannot choose this method. We cannot wait. The speed at which his life is dissipating is out of our expectations. Once his life soul starts to dissipate, it will be too late," the female supreme leader said. "I will think of a way. You have just reached perfection. The most important thing now is to stabilize your cultivation. Do not let his sacrifice be in vain," the female supreme said gravely. "I understand, this matter is not easy, but we have to do our best. While Changling and the female supreme are taboos in the homeland of West Buddha, we cannot be ungrateful for what we should do. Changling has restricted his freedom, we cannot take his life, the female supreme said seriously. The female supreme nodded and agreed. His promise to her was to help her avatar reach perfection. Now, he had done it. He gave up his body to help the female supreme level. However, none of them had expected that the time imbalance in the Forbidden Lands would speed up the loss of knowing Ming's lifespan. After his body was taken away, he was unconscious for 3 years and his life grew weaker. It was a fair trade. He gave back his freedom, but not his life. Changling was not good at strange arts. If she wanted to extend knowing Ming's life, she had to find another way. Perhaps, after dealing with the butterfly in the flower, she would need to make a trip to the northern plains. In the outer heavens, the immortal corpse cruised through the starry sky like a shooting star, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Behind them, the phoenix spread its wings and chased after them, flying towards the depths of the cosmos. Perhaps he would never be able to return to the human world after he left. However, the wandering immortal corpse was the closest existence to immortality that the knowing destiny state's eyes had seen. Perhaps the place where the immortal pride was going had the answer he had been looking for. The galaxy was vast and had witnessed the passage of time. The speed of the 3 dragon corpses had reached the pinnacle of heaven and earth. Even the phoenix with its extreme speed could barely catch up to them. That is, phoenix. When the dragon corpse and phoenix that were chasing after each other flew over a large planet with life, some of the top human experts of the 3 disasters saw them. They took a step forward and directly flew up into the sky. However, the dragon corpse and the phoenix were too fast. In the blink of an eye, they had already disappeared into the distance. No one knew how long they chased. Perhaps it was a month, perhaps 2 months, or perhaps a year. In the starry sky, there was no distinction between day and night. The sedan did not stop and the phoenix did not stop. They continued to fly towards the depths of the cosmos. Just when Ningchen thought that the chase would continue forever, the sedan stopped for the first time in front of a barren large planet and landed on it. In the tinkling sound, ghost energy filled the sedan. A beautiful figure in a red wedding dress walked out. Her head was covered with a red veil. The familiar aura was shocking. Behind her, the phoenix transformed and Ningchen appeared. When he saw the woman who walked out of the sedan, his body shook violently. His heart was in turmoil. It was the ghost woman. She was not the previous Rakshasa, nor was she an illusory mirror image. The aura was exactly the same. She was undoubtedly the ghost woman. Perhaps one day, the knowing destiny state would not recognize him, but he would never mistake the most beautiful figure in his memory. People would only know the depth of the pain when they were deeply hurt. At the same time, above Zhongzhou, the wind and clouds changed. A legendary battle pet warrior came in person and walked across Zhongzhou unhurriedly. Dressed in green, with black hair and a cold face, King Yan of the Great Xia came alone. He was not here to compete or to prove his swordsmanship, but to seek justice for his juniors. He did not care about the fights between his peers. He could also ignore the bullying of the younger generation. People needed to be trained to grow faster. However, the sects of Zhongzhou had gone too far. Because of an illusory prophecy, they gathered the power of the world to deal with a young man who had once risked his life for the human world. Did they really think that there were no seniors after the knowing destiny state? The wind blew, and the wind whistled. The strongest sword in the divine land came with a murderous aura to deal with the sects of Zhongzhou. Half a day later, in the Tuli ancient realm, a secret place protected by layers of formations, the wind blew. The man in green walked over steadily. Before he arrived, the sword intent had already passed through the cold wind and broken the protective formation. The formation dispersed. The man passed by without stopping for a moment. In the depths of the ancient realm, after the battle with the demonic butterflies, Tuli sensed that the formation outside had been broken. His expression sank. He flashed and blocked the intruder. "Who are you? How dare you trespass in the Tuli ancient realm?" said Tuli coldly. "King Yen of the Great Xia." The legendary battle pet warrior waved his hand and a sword rack appeared not far away. The 5 swords all had different auras, but they were all extremely powerful. "There's no need to talk nonsense. If you don't die in 3 moves, I'll kill myself." The legendary battle pet warrior of the Great Xia clenched his right hand and the sword rack trembled. A bone-chilling coldness spread. He unsheathed his green sword, freezing everything within 100 miles. How arrogant! Tuli's expression turned cold. He took a step forward and jumped into the air. Yuan condensed in his left hand, and black mist rolled like waves. He slammed his palm down with the force of the heavens. The first move was as powerful as a mountain. The ancient realm shook. The legendary battle pet warrior did not move under the might of the heavens. The green sword's cold chi surged and condensed the air. The sword and palm collided. The most accurate sword in the world broke through the black mist and dyed it red. The sword intent entered Tuli's body and he groaned. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Tuli extermination, skyfall. Tuli's expression turned ferocious. He ignored the sword that had pierced his hand and gathered evil chi in his palm. The force of the skyfall increased by several times. The second move was as powerful as the sky. The legendary battle pet warrior let go of the sword and condensed Yuan. Sword mastery revolved around him and turned into an invisible sword. He cut off the arm and blood splashed everywhere. Ugh! Tuli's left arm was cut off and his palm stopped moving. It was too late for him to stop. He was still approaching the legendary battle pet warrior. The third move was as powerful as the wind. The sword passed and the wind stopped. The last scene was reflected in his eyes. The green sword flew back into the legendary battle pet warrior's hand. The moment the 2 moves changed, the green robe disappeared and the sword went for the throat. Impossible! The legendary battle pet warrior was in disbelief. Before he could close his eyes, his head flew into the air and blood splashed everywhere. Was it fortunate or unfortunate that he could see the only one on the sword? Tu Li Zun had a mouth, but he couldn't say anything else. Clang! The sword returned to its scabbard. The legendary battle pet warrior waved his hand and left. Chapter 521. At the foot of the mountain, within the demon-subduing pagoda, the white-haired sub-hoodie sat in meditation, sweat dripping from his forehead. Faintly discernible devil chi spun around him, powerful and evil. The most evil devil chi and the most sacred Buddhist energy clashed, causing sub-hoodie's body to experience the test of Buddha and devil reincarnation. In his mind, a fierce battle was taking place, one that could destroy heaven and earth. It had already lasted for several hours. The white-haired sub-hoodie and the black-haired heart demon came from the same source, but they were completely different. Venerable sub-hoodie and ghost sub-hoodie fought fiercely with their 2 senses. "You want to kill me?" "Difficult." Ghost sub-hoodie circulated, pushing away the Buddha. The prayer beads in his hand had turned into 108 skulls at some point. Devil chi filled the sky, shocking everyone. Calamity and sin, Buddha cannot tolerate it. Venerable sub-hoodie raised the prayer beads and praised virtue. His Buddhist energy soared, wanting to sever the sin and restore his mind. "I am you. Killing me is equivalent to immolating yourself." Ghost sub-hoodie raised the skull prayer beads in his hand, and a vast devil chi covered the illusory world. Its terrifying power shocked even gods and Buddhas. Sub-hoodie heart meditation, Buddhism is boundless. Venerable sub-hoodie's expression didn't change in the face of the devil chi. He gently twisted his fingers, and the swastika spread out. Within the devil chi, Buddhist light rose, and a golden Buddha world appeared. The Buddha and Devil Chi intertwined, and the Bodhi Buddhist beads and Skull Devil beads intertwined. The Buddha and Devil Chi intertwined, creating the most intense battle. Subhudi's thought, forgive and sever sin. Venerable Subhudi gently twisted his fingers, and his Buddhist energy turned into a sin-severing weapon. Clear saint energy gathered and cut through everything. With a bang, Ghost Subhudi retreated several steps. There was no fear in his demonized expression. He let out a piercing sneer, and his devil chi appeared. 6 calamities, blood sin hell. The Buddha world's hell appeared, and blood sins filled the air. The terrifying demon realm caused the Buddha world to gradually become unstable, showing signs of collapse. Seeing this, Venerable Subhudi flipped his hands, and a vast amount of Buddhist energy rushed into the sky, stabilizing the collapsing Buddha world. Hee hee. The demon laughed foolishly, his ghostly state emotionless. Under the black Buddhist robe, his cold and arrogant face was emotionless. In the next moment, the demon's shadow disappeared and appeared in front of the Buddha. With a bang, a palm shot out. The battle began again, and the killing intent became even stronger. Subhudi flipped his palm to meet the attack. The prayer beads swayed, and the Buddha energy praised the momentum, fighting the demonic thoughts again. As the two moves collided, waves of air surged. The increasingly heavy palms landed on the Buddha demon's body one after another, causing the wind and clouds to go wild. It was a battle that was beyond one's understanding. The Buddha and the devil were fighting. Under the light of the green lamp, the Bodhi-Dharma form actually showed signs of cracking. Buddha energy and demonic chi surged, filling the entire demon-subduing pagoda. The 108 Bodhisattva statues in the pagoda shone with golden light, aiding the Buddha energy and suppressing the demonic chi. Within the illusory realm, under the influence of the demon-subduing pagoda, the stalemate between the Buddha and the demon-subduing pagoda began to tilt. Bodhi heart meditation, attaining Bodhi with a single thought. With the addition of the demon-subduing pagoda's power, Subhudi started to use the Buddha's sacred technique. A huge golden swastika appeared under him. Subhudi attaining the great Tao, its brilliance illuminated the mortal world, and the holy light purified the world, enveloping the entire world of Buddhism. The illusory realm continued to collapse. Subhudi attaining the great Tao surpassed the limit, drowning the demonic bodies and suppressing the demonic thoughts. Outside the illusory realm, the green lamp suddenly jumped. Subhudi's mind returned to normal. Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of blood, dyeing the green bricks in front of him red. In the end, the Buddha temporarily suppressed the demon in the battle between the Buddha and the demon. However, the Buddha's white hair was still dyed black. With sin on his body, how could he be as clean as before? At the same time, in Zhongzhou, the news about Tu Li's death quickly spread to all the sections. For a moment, the world was shocked. In Tianji City, 7 youths deduced day and night. Finally, on the 3rd day, they traced the identity of the swordsman and immediately sent someone to inform all the sections. In the divine land of the eastern region, there was only one on the sword. It was King Yan of the Great Xia. In Taibai Prefecture, the lord of Taibai Prefecture pondered for a long time. Then, he got up and wrote a letter. Immediately, he sent someone to deliver it. 2 days later, the announcement that the lord of Taibai Prefecture wanted to challenge the legend of Xia Kingdom to a battle at the Sky Moon Peak spread throughout Zhongzhou. Instantly, the whole region was in an uproar. The lord of Taibai Prefecture was one of the strongest among the human supremes. In the Battle of Zhao family, the reason why the demonic butterfly was severely injured was not only because of supremacy Tu Li's poison, but also because of the existence of the lord of Taibai Prefecture. The time specified in the letter was 10 days later on the Sky Moon Peak. They would have a life-and-death battle to end all the grudges. On the 2nd day after the news spread, a sword light cut through the sky. It was so shocking that it could be seen from thousands of miles away. "I'll accept it." The legend of Xia Kingdom replied and accepted the challenge from the top supreme of Zhongzhou. The most powerful sword in the divine land had surpassed the peak of the human supremes. He was also the leader of the Knowing Destiny sword. If the Knowing Destiny sword was the top of the sword, then there was another sword above the top, the only sword above the top. Zhongzhou didn't see any sword above the top in Zhongzhou. In Tianfu Mountain, the homeland of Western Buddhist reign fell. Light soon appeared. The Lord of Jing Feng Pavilion, the Lord of Discipline Pavilion, and the other cultivators of Tianfu Mountain greeted him respectfully. 3 years ago, the Red Demon was the Knowing Destiny Marquis of the Xia Kingdom. Light Zun asked calmly. Yes, Lord Jing Feng Pavilion said respectfully. Why didn't you report it? Light Zun asked again. Killing demons is the same, Lord Jing Feng Pavilion replied. The savior of the world is not the source of the disaster. Tianfu Mountain has made a mistake and it has caused regret. We can't make the same mistake again. Light Zun turned around and looked at the monk beside him. He said calmly, Lord of Discipline Pavilion, you go down the mountain to Zhongzhou today and try your best to resolve this grudge. Yes. Lord of Discipline Pavilion said respectfully. After giving his instructions, the Light Reverend's figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. From today on, everyone on Tianfu Mountain, including me, will reflect on their mistakes for 10 years as punishment. Yes, Light Zun. The Buddhist experts bowed respectfully and accepted the order. On an unknown barren planet in the outer sky, Knowing Destiny Marquis looked at the ghost girl in front of him. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. Under the red wedding dress, there was no vitality in her body. There was only ghost chi around her body. She waved her hand and put away the sedan chair. Then she walked forward. Ning Chen came back to his senses. He stepped forward and blocked the path of the ghost girl. He said hurriedly, Ghost girl, I'm Ning Chen. Don't you recognize me? However, the beautiful figure didn't stop. Her aura pushed Ning Chen away and she continued to walk forward. Ning Chen steadied himself and looked at the leaving figure. He couldn't figure out why. Sorry. Ning Chen sighed and moved forward again. He gathered his phoenix essence and activated the yellow spring. He wanted to restrain the ghost girl temporarily. At this moment, the ghost girl stopped and the ghost chi around her surged out. Before the Knowing Destiny state cultivators could react, they were sent flying again. She was unimaginably powerful. She had even surpassed the human supremes. She was no weaker than Knowing Destiny Marquis at the peak of half-supremes. However, he couldn't even get close to her. The red wedding dress left quickly. It seemed that she didn't want to be caught by Knowing Destiny Marquis. She disappeared in an instant. Ning Chen staggered a few steps and forced himself to stop. He wanted to chase after her, but he couldn't see any trace of the ghost girl. Ning Chen suppressed the anxiety in his heart when he saw a trace of a human in this unknown barren land. He quickly chased after the ghost lady. Something must have happened that he didn't know. He was very sure that the girl just now was the ghost girl. There was no mistake. But why? Phoenix Shadow. In the floating ice coffin, a beautiful figure was sleeping quietly. Her beautiful face was calm and peaceful. It was eternal in an instant. After chasing for a long time, there was still no trace of the ghost girl on the planet. However, there were signs of people coming. The dilapidated palace had been abandoned for an unknown number of years. Ning Chen entered and took a few glances at it. Just as he was about to leave, a powerful palm strike struck him, threatening to take his life. Ning Chen's face turned cold. He took a step and quickly dodged the palm. He looked at the figure that appeared in the palace and said, Sir, don't you think it's too much to kill me on our first meeting? A phoenix that walked into a trap. If you have the guts to break into the flirting wolf palace, you must have the courage to accept your fate of death. As he spoke, the flirting wolf appeared. Although the gray-robed young man was young, his aura was extremely powerful. He was already a half-supremes. Ning Chen heard this and squinted his eyes. It was unbelievable that the person in front of him could see through his identity. Suddenly, the gray-robed man moved. In an instant, the flirting wolf showed his sharp claws and attacked again. This is too much. Ning Chen's face darkened. He moved quickly and condensed qi in his sword finger to block the deadly claws. Not bad. The flirting wolf moved again. He was as fast as a flash of light. Afterimages appeared and the claws kept slashing. Seeing that the gray-robed man was aggressive, Ning Chen didn't hold back anymore. He condensed qi in his sword and a red sword intent rose around him. With a ripping sound, the gray-robed man was torn apart. Blood gushed out and dyed the palace red. Humph! The flirting wolf snorted coldly. He waved his hand and a black ancient mirror appeared in the sky. Under its light, it suppressed the void. The gray-robed man appeared in the mirror. The true body of the phoenix appeared. In the stagnant void, Ning Chen squinted his eyes. So, it was the phoenix. Ning Chen's body was restrained and he saw the sharp claws coming at him. He didn't dodge. Instead, he used his sword finger to meet the attack head-on. With a bang, the gray-robed man was pushed back several steps. Suddenly, his figure turned in the air and flew toward the ancient mirror floating in the sky. The green cauldron appeared and smashed down. There was a violent tremor and the ancient mirror cried out. The light instantly became sluggish. Ning Chen swung his hand and the green cauldron fell down. He activated the yellow spring restriction and temporarily sealed the ancient mirror. Then, his figure flashed and he flew back into the battle. Sword against claw, phoenix against flirting wolf. There was no external influence. It was a fair battle. Nirvana. Nirvana's sword light roared and surged. It was incomparably beautiful. Although it had lost its sword, it was still at its peak. It opened up 3,000 feet in the sky and shook the universe. Ah! The sword qi entered the gray-robed man's body and his eyes turned red. Blood gushed out of the gray-robed man's body. He was forced back dozens of steps. Elder brother, avenge me. With one last glance, the gray-robed man's body suddenly exploded. Blood and bones flew everywhere, filling the sky. The gray-robed man's success and failure were all because of greed. Ning Chen looked at the blood and bones in front of him and frowned. That last glance wasn't normal. At the same time, a pair of cold eyes opened at an unknown location. Looking at the distant gray-robed man's palace, the killing intent in his eyes was bone-chilling. Chapter 522. On an unfamiliar planet in the outer heavens, Ning Chen, who had just experienced a huge battle, had been searching the voracious wolf palace for a long time. He wanted to find some clues about this place. The palace was in ruins, and there were only some cultivation techniques and medicinal pills. Ning Chen casually put them away, not paying too much attention to them. The phoenix body was special, and there weren't many cultivation techniques that could be cultivated. Apart from the sun scripture, there were no other cultivation techniques that could be cultivated. Perhaps he could also cultivate the phoenix body's own cultivation technique. Unfortunately, the two phoenixes didn't leave behind any cultivation techniques. Their consciousness had vanished. After searching for a while, Ning Chen found an ancient scroll in an inconspicuous corner. After reading through it, he gained a general understanding of this place. This planet was called the Heavenly Mansion Planet. There was only one land, but it was extremely vast. According to the ancient scroll, a true immortal had appeared on the Heavenly Mansion Planet in the ancient era. However, too much time had passed, and it was impossible to find out. Ning Chen put away the ancient scroll and walked out of the palace. He didn't know why the immortal corpses that had been patrolling for tens of thousands of years would be the ghost woman in the palanquin. However, since the ghost woman had come to this planet, it meant this planet was extraordinary. It was very likely that the answer he had been searching for was here. Furthermore, there was one more thing. The Alcade King didn't have much life left. He needed to do his best to wake him up. This was an expert not weaker than a sovereign. In this unfamiliar outer heavens, he would be a great help to him. After leaving the remote palace of the greedy wolf, it was already 2 days later when Ningchen found traces of new people. There was an endless stream of people in the ancient city of the Nether Prefecture. Ningchen walked over and saw the first city he saw after arriving on the Heavenly Mansion planet. Martial artists could be seen everywhere. Although there weren't many true experts, it still showed that this was a martial place. 400 miles north of the city, a divine treasury has appeared. Everyone, let's go. Suddenly, someone on the street shouted. Soon after, numerous figures could be seen rushing towards the north. It was a spectacular and strange scene, causing everyone to be dumbfounded. Ningchen pulled back a martial artist not far from him and smiled. Brother, may I ask what a divine treasury is? The martial artist looked at the young man in front of him as if he was looking at a monster. He asked in a strange tone, you jumped out of a rock. Ningchen scratched his head and said, I came from the south. It's my first day here, so I'm not sure what's going on. From the south? When the martial artist heard this, his expression became much more polite. He chuckled and said, Brother, you might not know, but this divine treasury is a treasure left behind by an ancient powerhouse. I don't know when it will appear and see the light of day again. Brother, you're really lucky to encounter such a good thing on your first day here. Very rare. Ningchen asked curiously. Hee. The martial artist smiled awkwardly and explained, it's not that strange. In recent years, there have been at least 80 divine treasures that have appeared. No one knows what will appear. If brother is curious, you might as well go and take a look yourself. Even if you don't obtain any treasures, it's good to broaden your horizons. Ningchen nodded and smiled. Thank you for your reminder, brother. That's exactly what I was thinking. He could tell that this divine treasury was basically a pretense. Although there might really be some rare treasures, the probability was about the same as picking up a large piece of silver while walking. Just as the two of them were talking, 400 miles to the north of the ancient city of Yuzhou, the earth was shaking. Multicolored light was rising, and the strange scene was shocking. The divine treasury was about to appear, and more people were rushing over. Although most people had been deceived by the so-called divine treasury countless times, it still couldn't dispel the desire of ordinary martial artists to reach the heavens in a single step. In the distance, desolate beasts soared into the sky and war chariots bobbed up and down. Powerful figures stood on desolate beasts or war chariots, quietly waiting for the divine treasury to appear. Brother Zishao, I didn't expect you to be interested in this divine treasury as well. On the back of a strange beast that looked like a horse and a tiger, a blue-clothed man stood quietly. He looked at the figure on the war chariot and smiled. The divine treasury has no owner. The capable can obtain it. Why can't I come? On the war chariot, the purple-clothed man said calmly. Ah. The blue-clothed man smiled. It's not that you can't. It's just that the Supreme Mystery Palace has never lacked any treasures. Brother Zhiao's master is also one of the world's strongest experts. Why do you need to fight over this divine treasury with the descendants of small sects like us? I don't know whether or not the Supreme Mystery Palace lacks treasures, but I do know that the heavenly capital mountain has never been some small sect. Hua Fengyun, a battle of words is useless. If there's a need, let's fight, said the purple-clothed man indifferently. Since Brother Zishao has said this, then I can only respectfully accept, said the blue-clothed man. The two of them didn't say anything more. They calmly looked at the divine treasury in the distance. This time, the divine treasury was likely to be something incredible. They couldn't be careless. Boom! Just at this moment, huge cracks appeared on the ground. They spread out dozens of miles. The divine treasury was about to appear. Strange phenomena appeared one after another, and its power became even more shocking. The martial artists waiting outside the light also became nervous. In these past years, the divine treasury had frequently appeared, but there hadn't been many truly useful treasures. They hoped that this time it wouldn't disappoint them. Pong, there was another world-shaking tremor, and the ground shook violently. The large crack that split open once again spread out, extending to a distance of 50 kilometers. Such a shocking commotion could only be compared to the appearance of a rare divine treasure more than 10 years ago. What could it be? On the beast's back, Hua Fengyun narrowed his eyes. In the next moment, a terrifying earth flame surged out and soared into the sky. Those who didn't dodge in time were immediately swallowed by the earth flame's extreme heat. They only had time to let out a miserable scream before they were burned to ashes. A rain of fire fell from the sky. Wherever it fell, even the ground began to burn. The earth flame's power was completely displayed. Within the rain of fire, miserable screams rang out one after another. Those who hadn't yet reached the Xiantian realm began to die under this heavenly might. Pong, the last violent tremor resounded. The long-awaited divine trove had finally appeared. Lava spewed out, and within the sky-burning waves of fire, a powerful aura appeared, shaking the heavens and earth. In the distance, Hong Yi slowly walked over. Her eyes lit up when she saw the black figure within the lava. She had been unlucky for half her life. This time, she had finally encountered something good. At the same time, in the central plains, the cold moon hung high in the sky. The legendary cultivator heading west suddenly stopped and looked ahead coldly. "Since you're here, why are you still sneaking around?" Prince Yen waved his hand, and a sword rack flew out and landed on the side. The legendary cultivator of the eastern region's sword really lives up to his name. As he spoke, the void rippled, and one figure after another walked out. Their terrifying auras merged together, covering the sky and the moon. 9 half-exalts and 3 human sovereigns had appeared at the same time. This was the first time the legendary cultivator of the execution sword had teamed up. The battle at the heavenly moon peak was real, but it was also a trap. The words of the human sovereigns were witnessed by the world, and they couldn't go back on their word. However, if the swordsman died on the way and couldn't come as promised, then no one could be blamed. Today, the 3 sects of the Central Plains will meet the legendary cultivator of the Eastern region's sword. Ji Qiuyu, Li Xiaoran, and Bu Chuanqiu stepped forward. Their auras rose to the extreme. At the same time, the 9 half-exalts formed a formation in groups of 3. Sabers, swords, and halberds formed a path to hell. The strongest formation cut off all paths of retreat. They were determined to end the legendary cultivator of the Eastern region's sword. The sovereigns teamed up and the 3 sects formed a formation. The legendary cultivator of the Grand Xia had a cold expression on his face. He held the 2 swords on the rack with both hands and slowly pulled them out. The battle had begun. Cold blades shone brightly, and heaven and earth changed. 2 legendary swords against 3 venerables, and the sword moved like flowing clouds breaking through the mortal world. The 2 swords shone brightly in the sky. Each of their moves was at the level of returning to the void. On the other hand, the 3 sects formed a formation in groups of 3. The human sovereigns took the lead and cooperated with the formation to kill the legendary cultivator of the sword. The 3 sects took turns to attack and defend. The blades, swords, and halberds blocked the green and red lights. With the support of the Supreme Being, they cooperated well and had no flaws. The legendary twin swords were actually stalled for a moment. How can the imperial sword be blasphemed? Prince Yen took the opportunity to retreat. He snorted coldly and the two swords flew back into the rack. The next moment, the sand sword flew out and an invisible sword light broke through the sky. The sand sword scattered and the sword intent of heaven and earth filled the air. A flaw appeared in the formation of the three sections. At this moment, the green robes fluttered, the abyss condensed, and the soul was broken. The three half-venerables' weapons were broken, and they died. At this moment, the three half-exalts of the Zhao clan who had been hiding in the distance saw the formation collapse. They worked together to activate the Inue Heavenly Bow. In an instant, the Inue Heavenly Bow was revived. The leader of the three sovereigns, Bu Chuanqiu, sensed the awakening of the Zhao clan's Heavenly Bow. He stepped into the sky at the same time and activated his true origin. A rain of black arrows fell from the sky without any warning. They sank 3 feet into the ground. With the help of the human sovereigns, their power was earth-shattering. Prince Yen turned around in the rain of arrows. The green light was extinguished and he avoided the falling arrows. His clothes were torn apart and his hair fell to the ground. A black arrow brushed past the legendary cultivator's face and his hair was dyed red. "You're all dead." The legendary cultivator was furious. He waved his hand and the sword rack shook. The green and red lights turned into rays of light and flew out. At the same time, the sand sword and the Inue Heavenly Bow left his hand and the 4 swords flew into the sky. 4 swords move the world, heaven and earth fall together. It was a world-shaking move that appeared once again in the mortal world. The 4 swords shook the heavens and earth, and boundless sword pressure descended. As the swords passed, the heavens and earth collapsed, and the shattered void brought out pitch-black ravines. Blood and broken limbs flew everywhere. He took out the Zhiga spear and his clothes moved. He waved his sword and disappeared. When he reappeared, a sword light appeared again. Arg! Ji Qiuyu and Li Sharon's mouths turned red. They didn't dare to stay any longer and they quickly left. In the sky, Bu Chunqiu frowned and his silhouette faded away. After the battle, the wind was cold and the sky was red. None of the 9 half-exalts survived. The formation of the 3 sects had been defeated. Prince Yen waved his hand and the Zhiga spear returned to its scabbard. At the same time, the other 4 swords also returned to the sword rack. The legendary cultivator put away his swords and continued walking towards the heavenly moon peak. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.